We're about ready to get started here. I hope all of you have an agenda. We want to, as much as possible, stick to that. For those of us on the committee, we're going to start off sitting out here, guys. I see some of you there already because we're going to hear from some speakers and presenters here in just a moment. But let me welcome everyone here to this meeting. This is the third meeting of the House Business Incentive Study Committee. I just want to express my appreciation to all of those who helped set this up in the Athens area here, the University of Georgia, and we're going to have more recognition later, and to Representative Bob Smith, who helped put all this together. It's nothing that I can do. I just get to select where I'd like to have it, and between the staff and the folks here locally, you do a wonderful job in setting this up. This is my first visit to this facility here, and it looks wonderful. What a great room to have this in. So I'm going to sit down and hush, and we as a committee will be back up on this panel in roughly about 10 or 10:15 after some presentations are made. The focus of this meeting, of course, is dealing with manufacturing incentives for business development and economic development. And for a few opening and welcoming remarks, I'm going to first introduce and recognize Larry McKinney, and then we'll have the remaining speakers just follow suit after that. If you have a program, you see where you are on the lineup, and when Larry gets through, I'll invite you to come up here, and then we'll get started with the program. Thanks again.
Thank you. Well, let me add my welcome to you all, too. I'm Larry McKinney, president of the Athens Chamber, and I know you all have busy schedules, and we appreciate you being here. There's a lot of other places you could be, and I think your being here certainly reflects your desire to see a better business environment for the state of Georgia. As you know, as you just heard from the chairman, we're going to discuss state incentives for manufacturing, and certainly I don't think there's a better place in Georgia to discuss that than Athens. We've lost 3,000 manufacturing jobs since 2001, and our tax base is less than 5% of the manufacturing sector, and I think that's one of the smallest in the state of Georgia. So I think it's critical that we discuss that. This is a great place. I want to thank Bob Smith for securing Athens as a site for their third discussion, as I understand it, on business incentives throughout the state. And I also want to thank the chairman, Jeff Lewis, who you just heard from, and the rest of his committee. I think most of them, if not all of them, are here. State Rep Chuck Martin, David Ralston, Butch Parrish, and Greg Morris. So on behalf of the Metro Athens business community, thank you for coming, and I look forward to a great discussion today. I think Charles Grimes is going to come up now with the Oconee County Chamber.
Good morning. I want to thank Bob Smith also for acquiring this place and this nice place and having us here today. Just a few comments. I'd like to thank also this House Business Incentive Study Committee for hosting, letting Athens, Clark County, and the Oconee County Chamber host this event at this nice complex today. Both chambers welcome the opportunity to showcase our counties in promoting new businesses in the area. Oconee County is a bedroom community of Athens, the greater Athens area, and also the greater Atlanta metropolitan area. The atmosphere in the rural atmosphere in Oconee County, with close proximity to the University of Georgia, two major hospitals, excellent schools, and current and cultural events, make Oconee a desirable place to live, raise your family, work, and develop new businesses in the area. The Oconee County Chamber feels with these qualities the available land for industry with the corporation of local government and with your help in acquiring new businesses in other areas. We want to, it makes a great place for people to come locate and live in Oconee County. Thanks again for affording both counties the opportunity to host this committee meeting today. Thanks.
Good morning. Randy Powers, Director of State Government Relations here at the University of Georgia. Welcome to this great campus. The University of Georgia, of course, is committed to teaching, research, and outreach. This facility you're in today is probably one of the most successful programs we have had here at the University of Georgia. Been in this facility about 3 years, and this program has raised well over $100 million in research efforts. Welcome to the campus. If there's any way we can help you, we've got a lot on the agenda today, and I'll be around, as well as Jay Pryor, to help out. I think probably of the 236 members in the Georgia General Assembly, there's probably no member that loves this university more than Representative Bob Smith. We won't get him to bark for you, but we may ask him as we end up. He might want to do it then. Welcome to the University of Georgia, and welcome to all the representatives. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know.
Well, good morning again. I'm Terry McMillan, and I'm going to kind of set the stage on business incentives, tax credits in the state of Georgia. I love technology when it works. What we want to do is really cover some about business incentives, what works, what doesn't work, what we can recommend for manufacturers to increase the amount of business incentives available for manufacturers. Now, can anybody tell me that's representing manufacturers, how many tax credits do we have in the state of Georgia? Anybody want to guess that? 31. Who said that? Oh, John. Now, wait a minute. John is correct, but all right. I'm trying to give away $1 million, John. Now, you heard this before. I've been trailing around the state with these fellas. I have $1 million if you can tell me how many tax credits our competition has in North Carolina. Anybody want to guess? Now, listen, there's $1 million involved here. All right. Go ahead. Jerry, guess. Pick a number.
57.
That's close. It's actually 34. That's for you.
Oh, my goodness.
There are 31 tax credits in the state of Georgia, according to Dawn Sturbaum, who used to be with DOR, now she's with DCA. And our neighboring state in North Carolina has 34 different programs. Okay, that works. I want to address something about the small to medium-sized manufacturers. Now, the large ones have a lot of incentives available, but what about the small to medium-sized manufacturers? If you look at the economic engine of the state of Georgia, it's not the big guys, it's mostly the small to medium-sized businesses that drive the economy in the state of Georgia. So I want to address specifically some incentives that will address that particular group. Well, there's our competition. Georgia's 31, Florida's 21, North Carolina's 34, and South Carolina's 23. Just threw up federal for you, there's about 28 major programs. I've worked in 29 states to date. Our company, which is based in LaGrange, Georgia, travels all over the United States working with different organizations. And I'll put Georgia's 31 tax credits up against any state in the country. I haven't been in all 50, but in the 29 I've been in, which are the major ones, Georgia, I'd rank right at the top. If you look at what we have and what we offer to manufacturers, these are the primary ones that we offer to manufacturers in the state of Georgia. Now, you notice on the left-hand side, this growth tax credit, and I listed again on the right-hand side. The growth tax credit is one of those tax credits that never really worked in the state of Georgia. What it says is that if you grow your business by at least 20% in 3 consecutive years in your Georgia state tax liability, you get a tax credit for that. But by the time you use all the other tax credits, and then you plug in the growth credit, there's not much you can use. Let me give you an example. We had a major call center, and I walked in one day and I said, I got some great news for you. I talked to CFO. I said, we got you about $500,000 in small growth tax credits. And they said, great. I said, but here's the other side of it. You're only going to be able to use about $15,000. And this is one tax credit that does not carry forward at all. If you don't use it, you lose it. So they weren't able to use it. But when I first told them that, they said, great, we can put on about 12 additional jobs. Now that's the purpose of tax credits. They want to encourage economic development. And I can tell you in the state of Georgia, they do. We looked at that growth credit and wondered why they would have such a thing if it, number one, can't be carried forward, number two, is not worth that much. But it does sound good, doesn't it? If you grow your business by at least 20%, and we would love every business in the state of Georgia to do that. We'd love them to grow 20% each year. Think of all the additional income that's going to be in the state of Georgia. Well, there's the question that we ask everybody. Why in the world would you want to pursue tax credits? And the first item there is the reason we're in business. We're in business to make a profit. We're for-profit businesses, and without that profit, we can't continue to exist. It also gives budget flexibility. The Georgia retraining tax credit, for instance, we have several accounts that when they find out their numbers for retraining tax credits for this year, they add a percentage to it, and that becomes their budget for training in the following year. So does it work? Yes. In most cases, it really does. And that money that is spent for training is usually spent right here in the state of Georgia. Well, they get an increased return on investment. Important numbers for businesses, especially manufacturers. Better skilled workforce. Do we need that? Absolutely. And the last one I close with is increased profitability. We've got to have that. But if you look at why tax credits, it helps our manufacturers stay in business. And we lose manufacturers every year in this state. You heard of Char-Broil Grills? They used to employ 2,500 people down in Columbus, Georgia. Well, guess where they're made now? China, as many things are. Well, we lost that one. We tried to keep it here, but they couldn't compete when it was almost 35% less just to make it over in China. Well, we want to help manufacturers expand in Georgia, and we want to maintain those Georgia jobs. And by doing that, we've got a win-win for everybody. So can your Georgia manufacturers use their tax credits? And for the most part, yes, they can. Now, the two big ones for manufacturers, the retraining tax credit, which they can use for up to 50% of their liability, the job credits for the remaining 50%. But here's the question, and here's where we need to improve tax credits for manufacturers. What if a manufacturer is operating an NOL, net operating loss? They invest, they expand their plant, they add new machinery, new equipment, and they can't use tax credits because they have an NOL. What do we do in that case? Well, they can certainly carry forward, and some tax credits carry forward for 10 years in the state of Georgia. Some don't carry forward at all, some carry forward for 3 years, some for 5 years. It varies. It's too bad it's not standardized. That would make it a lot easier on folks if it was. So what if they can't use tax credits? Well, let me go back for a minute. One of the recommendations I'm going to make on how to improve tax credits, business incentives for manufacturers is to address that question, because we get that question a lot. Because if it's a progressive manufacturer, they're always expanding. Well, let's take a minute and look at the tax credits that are used the most. The retraining tax credit is probably the most widely used in the state of Georgia. And yet, if you do a percentage on the number of businesses in Georgia, and we got all gentlemen here from the chamber here, I don't know how many businesses that you say there are in the state of Georgia, but let's say there's 150,000 plus. That's something that generally most people agree with. You know, less than 1% of the businesses take advantage of this credit? And yet that's the only tax credit that we have that is open to every for-profit company. It's that important. That's why we need to expand that particular tax credit. Because that's the only one we have. Jobs credit, well, unless you're in one of those 6 preferred industries, and by the way, manufacturing is the most preferred in every state that I've been in. They really cater to manufacturing, as they should. Well, the investment credit, that's only open to 2 industries. Guess what? Manufacturing is one of them. The other one's telecommunication. That's the only 2 that's open to that. And some of those investment credits don't carry forward. So the question I want to ask, are Georgia tax credits doing their job of economic development? And as I travel throughout the state of Georgia and other states, absolutely. Now, there are some cases where they don't benefit economic development, sure. But for the most case, I see in the state of Georgia, they actually do develop economically for the state. So can we do something to improve them? Absolutely. I got a couple of recommendations for you. But also, tax credits are the way that Georgia competes with competition. Now, those of you that are manufacturers here, you have competition. Well, so does the state of Georgia. And that's Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee. They all compete with Georgia. Tax credits are an integral part of how we compete with other states. Take away tax credits, and you take away our ability to compete with other states. Now, are some states better than Georgia? Well, I personally like California for training because they give you cash up front. They give you a third of the money up front, they give you a third when you're halfway through, and they give you a third at the end of it. Now, that's cash in hand. Now, companies like that out there. I'm not suggesting that for Georgia, although it certainly would be nice for some manufacturers to have that. But let's take a look at how we can improve them. The retraining tax credits is designed to improve the skills of the workforce, not managers. Now, I taught for many years at the Keller Graduate School in Atlanta, and I trained managers from all around the state. Management training is not included in this tax credit. And yet, how can our companies, how can our manufacturers improve unless the knowledge, skills, and competencies of our managers improve? And I can tell you, and I can ask you the same question, how many of you had a majority of good managers in your career? Anybody want to hold up your hand? We got one back here. Well, listen, that is so important and so unusual. Jerry, would you give him $1 million? You rarely see that. Yeah. Don't try to cash out at Walmart. But managers need help in developing their skills as well as a skilled workforce. So I'm suggesting that we add management training in. Job tax credits. Now, they're open to manufacturers. We have 4 tiers in the state of Georgia. What if you're in a tier 4 and you're a small manufacturer? You have to add at least 25 new jobs to be eligible for this tax credit. Well, don't we want all manufacturers to expand? And yet, if you got under 100 employees, adding 25 is fairly significant. What if we decreased that number of jobs required by the tier county? Tier 1, you only have to add 5. But tier 4, you got to add 25. That's a lot of additional headcount that most manufacturers can't afford. If we want to include incentives for manufacturers, then let's lower the number of jobs required to help out those small to medium-sized manufacturers. This addresses the question of an NOL. How can manufacturers use their tax credits if they're on an NOL? When they have a big expansion, this is one way they can do it. And here again, unless you're in a tier 1, lower 40 county, you can't use it against withholding. Well, let's let the manufacturers use their tax credits against their withholding regardless of the tier they're in, because that's who we're trying to help. And the investment tax credit, if you're a small to medium-sized manufacturer, your threshold is at least $50,000 before you're eligible for this tax credit. It only carries forward for 3 years. Well, we've lowered that threshold to encourage small to medium-sized manufacturers to put in additional equipment and let them get a tax credit on it. So how we strengthen the incentives for manufacturing includes management training, modify the job credits, reduce the thresholds, let them use their tax credits against withholding. That way they get an immediate return on those tax credits. And if they can use them, then they can grow and expand and maintain jobs and keep those jobs in the state of Georgia. Now, here's a couple other ones to consider. I always like to give Jeff a lot to consider on this. The research and development tax credits. That's probably one of the most complicated tax credits there is. And what the state of Georgia does, they say if you can get it approved by the IRS on the federal side, we'll approve it on the state side. Well, why don't we simplify the code? You know, if you look at some of the codes that we have for tax credits, you probably need a PhD to really understand them. And I'm not sure I understand all there is to know about tax credits in the state of Georgia. You have to read it, reread it, reread it, reread it. But we do need to simplify the code to make it easier for our manufacturers to use. And then there's one called the basic skills. Is the Hispanic population growing or not in the state of Georgia? How do we address English as a second language? Because that's important to manufacturers. They're hiring a lot of these folks, and yet unless they can understand English, what do? Now, I just had my house re-roofed because of hail damage earlier this year. There were 6 Hispanics that worked on that for 3 days, and they completed the job, and they did an outstanding job with it. And I never understood a word they said. We had to use almost sign language and point to things that we wanted to have done. It was incredible. I wish I spoke a little bit of Spanish. But why not include that under the basic skills tax credit? Now, I just threw in a couple other states just to give you an idea of what they do. Florida has a whole list. They have 55 enterprise zones down there that offers manufacturers additional incentives. North Carolina, they got a pretty good job tax credit program over there. South Carolina, the same way. We patterned some of our tax credits after South Carolina, but we made them better. And then I threw up a couple about federal, but all these apply, for the most part, to manufacturing. And that's just some context for Jeff in case his group has any additional questions on tax credits. I did want to comment about an article the AJC ran last month about business incentives. Some of the information and figures they used in there are not that accurate. Does that surprise you? They talk about hundreds of millions of dollars given away for job credits. Well, that particular tax credit is only about $25 million a year. And if you take job credits as a whole, it's only about $100 million a year. So when you look at the total amount of revenue coming in the state of Georgia, that's next to nothing. But it's an important area that enables us to compete with other states and enables us to grow and expand manufacturing in the state of Georgia. And with that, I thank you for your attention this morning.
Good morning. I'm Margaret Wagner-Dahl, and I am part of the piece of the UGA enterprise that takes pragmatic outcomes from our research and tries to turn it into startup companies. And I am very delighted to have this opportunity to share with you some of the thinking, and Representative Smith actually very aggressively asked us to talk about a specific area of research interest to us, but also because we've identified it as having strategic commercial significance to the state, and that is in the area of nanotechnology. Although we're going to spend a little bit of time just explaining to you, it's nanotechnology the UGA way. It's different from our friends down the road. And To that extent, I'm going to introduce my colleagues. Fred, you're loading up here? Okay. Because basically what I want to tell you is the University of Georgia has developed a very well-defined structure and process for translating these outcomes from the research enterprise into very significant commercial entities. And in fact, I'm going to leave you a bit of propaganda at the back where the coffee is. It's called A Mission Possible. And this is based on a study that we've been doing for the last 4 years, which really tracks the number of companies and the types of companies that have originated from the research enterprise at the University of Georgia. And I can tell you we are now up to 100 companies since 1974. And those companies very typically fall within the life sciences arena. And in Northeast Georgia particularly, this is a crucial aspect of our economic development. And in fact, I see my colleague here, Flora Tidings, we've been working with the local leaders and informal and formal leaders of the community to really make sure that we're positioned in the way that we need to be positioned to transform this economy in the Northeast. The Georgia BioBusiness Center is our biotech business incubator, and we have a unique model. We embed our commercial facilities right alongside with these gentlemen, right alongside faculty who are doing absolutely state-of-the-art research. And in that context, we're going to share with you a very new facility, a new enterprise that we're embarking on. It's been in the formative stages really for the last 4 years, but we're about to move into a facility that is going to be the intersection of nanotechnology and biotechnology, so we call it nanobio. But it has a very specific focus, and I'm going to have my colleague Fred Quinn probably put the fear of God into you about some diseases around here that we're trying to deal with. But the point being, UGA's very unique position with this is all about our considerable research strengths in infectious disease and the intersection that nanotech provides. And so Fred's going to talk about it from the infectious disease point of view. And then we've got Yiping Zhao, who is the guy who's in the trenches actually working with the infectious disease people from the nanotech perspective to make it real, to make it happen. And then we even asked the head of physics and astronomy, Bill Dennis, to kind of give you the big picture on it. So we're going to do this really fast.
Good morning, everyone. I was asked to give a very brief speech, and so I will give a very brief talk. Whoops, with some reverberation. Yes, so what I'm going to try and do in just a very few minutes is summarize what's going on primarily at the University of Georgia, but also in North Georgia as part of our plan to look at emerging infectious diseases and zoonotics. So I'm not going to get into terminology or hopefully too much detail here, but the big picture.
I asked them not to.
The big picture here, folks, is that we have a lot of strengths here at the University of Georgia, and again, particularly in North Georgia, in the way we approach infectious diseases. From this little chart here, you can see the intersection between animal disease and human disease is very real. There are a lot of terms being thrown about emerging infectious diseases, zoonotic diseases. For all practical purposes, these are the same things. In general, what you see in the news these days about SARS or West Nile or BSE or any of these other terms, these are referred to as zoonotic infections. These are infections that can pass freely between humans and animals. What you hear about nowadays, this current effort with E. coli, O157H7 in spinach, that's also a zoonotic disease. It probably passed from an infected cow to the local spinach patch. So these are very, very common events in our day and age, and what we do about them is incredibly important. Bio and agroterrorism, obviously, are in our thoughts and in the news. Anthrax, plague, many other infections, Ebola virus. These are also zoonotics. These are diseases that are typically in the animal populations and again pass freely between the animals and humans. These are just a few examples, believe it or not, folks, of what's going on in the world today as far as zoonotic emerging infectious diseases. There are a bunch of them. And I cannibalized this from a CDC chart that I acquired a while back and updated it. The red dots, I did not include the most recent O157H7 outbreak from the field in California, but all of the other ones are fairly up to date, and as you can see, zoonotics are a big deal. So what are we doing at UGA? Well, we have many very good programs, both in the laboratory sector and in the education sector, to look at zoonotics. The College of Veterinary Medicine here is focusing on these zoonotic diseases, which you would think would be a very logical place for them to focus. The parasitic, viral, and bacterial and emerging infectious diseases, drug discovery and disease intervention, vaccine development. We've recently hired a new director. He's a Georgia Research Alliance vaccine development director, Ralph Tripp. And again, our bio and agro-defense capabilities are increasing dramatically. These are just a few of the partners that in North Georgia that we affiliate with. Way up there in the corner is the Nanoscience and Engineering Group, as well as the College of Veterinary Medicine. As you can see, Emory, CDC, and several other partners. We meet on a regular basis, and we're doing some very amazing things. On this campus, here's a very short cross-section of the investigators working in, again, emerging infectious diseases and zoonotics. Some of the big players in the field, the Ebolas and the tuberculosis, tularemia, SARS, influenza, they're all up here. It's all being done here, folks. And as you can see, NanoSec is partnering with several of the groups here in the development of rapid diagnostics. And Yiping will tell us quite a bit about that in just a few minutes. As far as facilities go, we have several sites here on campus that are capable of dealing with high containment research. These are just three of the complexes. Up on the upper right-hand corner is the ARC, which is our new 75,000 square foot BSL-3 and BSL-3 ag, animal, and human research facility. The Coverdell building also has a BSL-3 research complex on the upper floor, and then our pride and joy down here in the lower left-hand corner is the Riverbend South complex, which is will have a high containment facility. And then just to expand on that a little bit, and Yiping will talk about this, the clean room up there in the upper left-hand corner, adjacent to the high containment research, infectious disease research lab in the lower right-hand corner. And this will be a very unique facility to allow us to do some diagnostic development, vaccine development, and therapeutic development that can't be done anywhere else. So that's my spiel.
Lovely. Thank you, Fred. Yiping, while you're setting up, just to explain a little in detail, that map is our new facility, and what's very important for you to know is, as I said, the Georgia Biobusiness Center integrates. We actually embed the commercialization processes right alongside these guys. So in that building, we'll actually be managing the storefront, which means it has a very professional business-like atmosphere. And part of that is because we expect to have companies in there that are working right alongside these guys, taking those research discoveries out into the commercial sector. This is going to take a long time. One of the things I think that is difficult for state leaders to understand is the length of time it actually takes to get these things out into the commercial sector. We think this is going to be a 10 to 15-year process. The nice thing is when you do it within a university, we like to look at things for the next 50, 100 years. We don't have a problem with that. But in terms of explaining that to the leadership, it's a key piece of this. Yiping is going to talk very specifically about some of the work he's doing, and the point that I want to emphasize is the interdisciplinarity of this program. Yiping is definitely on the engineering side, But he's working with one of our most formidable Georgia Research Alliance eminent scholars, Dr. Ralph Tripp, who came here from the CDC. It's this kind of collaborative approach that really makes the difference. Yiping.
Yeah, I guess what Margaret means is this chat. Actually, we want to put people from nanotechnology, which like people like me, to do enabling technology for technology development, and the people from like Fred from infectious disease, which really have the applications for those kind of technique. And then Margaret actually will come in and commercialize all the technique. In this case, we could start up companies and boost the Georgia economy. And also, the strength of UGA is not only the infectious disease. Actually, when I first came over here, I realized there's a lot of activities in other biological technology. Actually, for example, in food science, in stem cell research, actually, in fact, I'm actively involved with all those other research areas as well. The building we're talking about is this Riverbend Research South, and I was the first one actually moving to this building to initiate this kind of collaboration. And so actually, honestly, I came here August 2002, so I have been here only for 4 years. And through these 4 years, we have filed 6 patents, which regarding the nanobiotechnology, and also, unfortunately, we haven't attracted any Georgia funding yet. So we attract about $2.8 million external funding from DOE, NSF, and other agents. And we also established collaborations with the infectious disease, local, and the food science, bio and ag, engineering department, and also a collaboration with other universities around the nation and the industries. What we are doing actually is, for my group, essentially come from a physics department, essentially doing nanomaterials. Then we're trying to develop novel materials and also explore their novel properties. But by exploring those novel properties, we also want to develop platform technology for chemical and biological sensors. And also we can apply this technique to do tissue engineering and nanomechanics, which I'll touch a little bit about these other 2 issues, but I'll focus on this platform technology for chemical and biological sensors, since Fred already and their background how important this kind of technique is for terrorism or disease diagnostics. The main object is we really want to develop fast and high sensitive and also portable. This is the key because you cannot move in a big heavy equipment to the Iraq, for example, or to North Korea to detect biological agents or to detect nuclear waste, something like that. And to do the virus and the bacteria detection, and especially for disease diagnostic, food safety, and the national security. And essentially, there's few drawbacks for the current detection technique. Those techniques usually are very slow. It takes like 8 to 48 hours in order to get the result of the disease. And not very sensitive and not very selective. Usually, they require a large samples. For example, if you go to the hospital, you do a blood test. Usually, how many milliliters of blood they'll draw from you? 20 milliliters. That's a lot of blood, essentially. So if we can develop a technique only is, for example, in a droplet of the blood, then you can do all this kind of disease diagnostic. That is fantastic. And also, those kind of current techniques, they usually use multiple steps. You need to go through many, many steps to do the detection. And also expensive, bulky, as I said, they cannot moving around. And the technique, one of our techniques, essentially, is not all the technique we recently developed, actually have already raised a lot of interest in California. Those companies always send me emails requiring information about this tech. It's so-called surface enhanced Raman probe based on molecular fingerprint. And I don't want to go to details. We already filed 3 patents for this technique, to protect our intellectual property. And the advantage of this technique is that this technique is very fast. You only need less than 1 minute. You can get the information about whether you have the disease, whether you have the virus in that sampling. And also very sensitive. Usually it's about 10 or 1,000 times sensitive, more sensitive than the current technology. And only requires a very minute sampling. For example, usually we do is we put 0.5 microliter. What's the idea of 0.5 microliter is if you use a needle, put a droplet. That is 0.5 microliter. It's about that much of sample you need. And also it's inexpensive. Actually, here I have a picture. This is a picture we developed. It's a portable device over here. We have a laptop. We have this central device. And then with that central device, we only have this kind of small probe over there. This is about 6 to 10 pounds. And this is our first generation prototype device we want in the future, if possible, we can want to sell. And then we have this essentially is a one-step process. You shoot the laser and you detect the spectrum, and then you discriminate the virus. And it's portable, as I said, you can carry in the battlefield as well. Not necessarily has to be battlefield. Okay. The application is right now our main focus is for the virus detection. So we have done experiment actually can demonstrate that use this technique we can differentiate different viruses like HIVs, RSVs, in flus, and also more important, this technique we can differentiate different strains of virus. For example, people recently talk about bird flu. Bird flu, the symptom is most like flus, right? Actually, Fred knows much more better than me because those are just the modification of ordinary flu. So in order to do that, you probably need to go through a lot of big labeling process. However, using this technique we developed with one shot, we can differentiate the bird flu from the ordinary flu virus. And also, we worked extensively on the bacteria recently, especially collaborating with USDA Russell Lab down the road. And we work on the E. coli 0175 and Samarana. And we have already demonstrated this technique is 10 times better than the current technique. And besides this, we also initiate other kind of detection. For example, for these ovarian cancers, I'm collaborating with some people in California. We already demonstrate this is 10 times better. And nuclear waste, we're collaborating with people in Savannah River National Lab. We demonstrate that it's 10 times better in terms of detecting the uranium waste. And explosives, and also the nerve gas or toxins, we collaborating with some people back in Massachusetts in the company. They also demonstrate we use the same technology. As I said, this is a platform. It's not only can use for detecting bacteria or virus. Use the same technology, we can detect all this kind of thing with very small amount, very high sensitivity. And our future direction, actually, we want to make this technique even better. For example, we want to make them as a biochips. We can put multiple bioagents and to do the gene sequence because this is better than the current gene sequencing technique. We also want to miniaturize this technique. For example, we can integrate them into a size of a watch. So you can wear it. Actually, people already done something like that in Stanford. They can miniaturize this device totally into a size of watch. And also, you can do bioimaging as well to do the early cancer detection. However, all this depends on the key facility, which we don't have over here at UGA. Although I built a very small, tiny clean room, but that's definitely not enough to meet all this kind of requirement. And since this is a very good technique, right now we are writing a business plan. We're trying to start a company and trying to sell this thing in the future. And also we need more R&D to improve this technology. And other kind of technology which is developing, for example, we have another 3 patents about the glucose sensors for diabetes patient, other kind of virus and bacterial detection technology. Besides the detection, actually we are doing some kind of tissue engineering. We're trying to build 3-dimensional cells using our nano and microstructures. And here shows some pictures of how the stem cell grow onto a microstructure surface, and the cells, neural cells grow onto a 3-dimensional tissue scaffold. You said, why we want to build a 3-dimensional cell? And usually people for drug discovery, usually using, they discover some new drugs, they want to do the test. They cannot just apply to human yet. They first apply to the living cell. Usually the living cell people, biology people cultured, they grow on a flat surface. However, we know that everybody knows that the cell in our body is not growing a flat surface. They have different response, essentially. So if experimentally we can engineer cells grow in a 3-dimensional fashion, then we'll apply that new drugs. Then the information, the response of that cell give back to us will be much accurate than a cell in a flat surface. So that's how we are doing this 3-dimensional cell growth in this case. We also grow neural networks. Actually, here shows some neuron cells. They have axons extended out and connected together. So why this is important? We know that in our brain, all the neurons are connected together, right? If part of our brain gets damaged, how we can repair it? Maybe in the future we can embed this kind of chip into our brain. For example, those are the neurons, then we can connect into certain kind of computer chips embedded in our brain to repair this kind of damage in this case. So we are doing this kind of research as well. And furthermore, one last slide. We are doing those nano models, not only for drug discovery, also not only for drug delivery, because one of our strengths over here is develop vaccines. And also this also for a disease treatment. For example, we have making a multi-layer of magnetic nano spiral structures. Those spiral structures, if you take a look at it, they're like drills. Actually, if I can remotely drill it, use magnetic field, rotate it, if we put this into the blood vessel, for example, people has strokes, right? Usually, the stroke, how to treat the stroke, if you say the big blood vessel get stuck with something, people have a so-called stent to use that, but this is a very big stuff. However, if you have a minor stroke, that means that happens in your very small blood vein, blood vessels. You cannot use that stent to do that. How can we fix that problem? We can put this nanomotor into it and then drill through it. And also probably Fred knows there's so-called biofilms. We can also drill through that using this kind of technology. But those are my future plan. Actually, we developed all this, but right now, I don't have the funds to pursue that, fortunately. So, but I only just say this is the future. This is the future. Okay, we are developed at UGA right now. That's different from what people are doing at Georgia Tech, because we combine our strengths. My strength over here is nanotechnology, and also UGA's strengths, biotechnology, and go further. That's how I see how the future of nanotechnology can go. So
Thank you, Yipeng. Can you tell we're a little bit passionate about this? 2 points before I have Bill very quickly run through the big picture with this is, first of all, Yipeng has referenced, we are going to be working on getting a clean room funded, and that's a very key piece of this, because what we're doing at the moment is doing proof of concept work. but we're going to have to scale this up. So it's a scalability issue for us. So we're going to be working on that issue. The other piece of this that I wanted to emphasize, because what you're seeing is this kind of technology has a high degree of sensitivity, specificity, but it also is very easy to use if you can deal with the scalability issues. But the other part that I wanted to emphasize for us in this business, UGA, or the state has some very effective economic development tools for this kind of high-tech startup company formation. And what we're advocating is those tools are there. The Life Sciences Facilities Fund, the State Biotechnology Seed Fund, these are key issues for us, but they need to be much better resourced. They're, in terms of comparisons with other states, they're woefully under-resourced. We've done the best we can, but if we're going to grow nanotechnology, either between Georgia Tech or UGA or wherever, those programs need to have much more resource behind them. I've asked Bill, as the head of physics, astronomy, but really one of the originators of this nanobio program, to just give you some real key bullet points. And you're the last, and you have to go fast.
Okay.
Sorry.
So what I'd like to address this morning is who we are, what are we doing, where are we trying to go, and what's slowing us down in getting there. Okay. So a little bit of background. Nanotechnology at UGA hit a major starting point with the when the Nanoscale Science and Engineering Center, or NanoSec, was conceived, what was back in 2001, which seems a long time ago. This was because faculty at UGA recognized that nanotechnology not only had huge potential, but that research at the interface of nanotechnology and biotechnology was going to be a key growth area, and it has massive application potential, which you just, I hopefully have just seen. So Nanotech's mission was to promote nanotechnology research at UGA by facilitating the formation of interdisciplinary research teams. And I think one of the perfect examples is the example you've just seen of the collaboration between Yiping Zhao, Rich Luhi in chemistry, and Ralph Tripp in infectious diseases. Another thing that is that NanoSec has, from its inception, has been committed to establishing a unique interdisciplinary research environment. And with the support and leadership of the Vice President for Research at the university, what you've just seen earlier is that such a facility is being realized now, just down the road from here at the Riverbend Research South building. And let me emphasize again, what Riverbend Research South brings together are researchers in nanotechnology, in biotechnology, such as infectious diseases, and what's unique is it co-locates them with UGA's best in expertise in biobusiness and commercialization. You've seen an example of one of UGA's interdisciplinary team. UGA is hiring in the nanotechnology area. Just this semester, we have had 2 nanotechnology hires. Both of these, in a typical UGA collaborative sense, are not faculty members in a single department, but they're joint hires between UGA's Faculty of Engineering and an academic department, one of them physics, the other of them chemistry. Physics and Astronomy is planning to hire an eminent scholar in the area of nanobio. Okay, so we have got great people. We're trying to hire more great people. They're generating great ideas, and what is fantastic is that they are translating these ideas into intellectual property and devices, okay, that have commercialization potential. So, what are the major speed bumps on the way to bringing this effort to the next level? It's simple. It's the lack of critical shared facilities. And
The one that you've heard mentioned again and again, and I'm going to re-emphasize it, is a bio-friendly clean room facility, and the university has committed 3,000 square feet of space sitting next to the infectious disease labs, next to Yiping Zhao's lab, just down the road in Riverbend Research South. So I guess when I came up to this table, I was wondering what I would hope to find, and what I hoped was to see a couple of those $1 million bills. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I've given you a short overview. If you're interested in learning some more, out on the coffee table outside, there are a couple of brochures that say a little bit more.
This will give you information on NanoSec, and then I'm also putting some of these out too. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Randall Morris with the Fanning Institute of the University of Georgia's Public Service and Outreach Division, and I am appreciative of the opportunity to join your group, Mr. Chairman, and talk to you a little bit about the use and application of economic development incentives for the business manufacturing pursuits in Georgia. I come to you from the Fanning Institute, where what you just heard was the real-time application of research at the university. What we do through the Fanning Institute is provide outreach services, and we work with communities and institutions all over the state to help enhance and improve their economic development programs. Specifically, I use my background of over 20 years in economic development, doing projects at the local and state levels to help advise and counsel local communities on how they can improve their existing programs designed to create jobs and business through economic development activity. Incentives is a major tool in the toolbox that we at the local community level as well as the state level have as a necessary component in that toolbox, and I hope that some of the information that I will share with you can accent that. First of all, what are incentives and how are they used in Georgia? Well, first, incentives are a tool. We have a lot of tools that we use in the toolbox to accomplish economic development, and incentives is just one of those tools, but its use is specifically for economic development. And economic development in its purest sense is the creation of jobs and or wealth at the community level, which impacts certainly the entire state. What is different today in 2006 regarding economic development, the process of economic development, as opposed to years past? Well, first, there are fewer expansions occurring today in the economic development arena, consolidation of business rules, and there are more winners and losers as opposed to win-win situations, specifically through consolidation. So there are fewer parties out there that we have the ability to go out and recruit or help expand today because of business models merging together. There are different logistical questions that come into play today in the economic development process. Time is shorter and it's more valuable today. There's a lot more offshore competition. There are more publicly owned businesses which create shareholder accountability and limit somewhat the creativity that's often necessary to make deals work. There's less subjective criteria available to help through the decision process of where business expands or relocates. Certainly the internet has transformed all of our worlds, and it's transformed certainly the role of the economic development practitioner in this state. There are fewer opportunities to be on the front end of how deals are determined to be located or where they expand. And certainly I've already mentioned the time parameters. This is just a little information on the rate or the decline of actual projects in this country through 2000 and 2003 for startups and expansion of manufacturing facilities, and you can clearly see the decline exhibited there. Looking at Georgia specifically, where will the jobs be in our sectors in Georgia? And you can see from 1988 to 1999, there was a significant decline in manufacturing jobs, and the projected further decline in just 4 years really it tells a stark story about what we need to do to keep a balanced economic development investment portfolio for Georgia. Certainly we're growing in the services, and we're tending to those, and we're growing in the agriculture, construction, and mining process some, but we can do a lot more there. I want to talk to you a little bit about what companies look for when they are expanding or relocating. And this is a survey that an economic development publication called Area Development does on an annual basis, and they actually survey companies that the previous year were involved in expansion or relocation activities around the country. They survey the CEOs, and on any given year, these primary components here will be in the top 10, but they will move from spot to spot within the top 10. And this was, as you can see, in 2002 and 2003, the particular ranking of important criteria in the decision-making process. State and local incentives in 2003 certainly were at the top. Previous year, they weren't at the top, but they were right near the top. And I show this to you so that you can see these are what the site location consultants and the real estate corporate executives that are engaged in the process of expanding or moving their companies. These are the business criteria decisions that come into play when they make these decisions. When you look at the subjective criteria, the quality of life, through their survey process, Area Development has identified these particular characteristics of community development. And you can see that they're typically, every year, each one of these categories is in the list, but they may change ranking. Incentives today, they're not going away. They've been around for a very long time. If you go back into the 1800s when the railroads were expanding across this country, the railroad companies provided incentives for companies to locate near the rail lines, and that was the beginning. In Georgia, up until about the mid-'80s, most of the incentives that we offered in Georgia were related to property tax abatements. It was in the mid to late 80s that in Georgia we began looking at the larger statewide incentive packages that were tied to investment tax credits and local incentives that varied from type to type. But they have been around, they are around, and frankly they are so integrated into the economic development process that they are not going to go away. What are the trends in incentives? It's important to realize that incentives never make a bad deal good, but they can make a good deal better. We should never, at the local or statewide level, predicate our involvement with a prospect in hopes that our incentives will turn a bad profit and loss statement into a good profit and loss statement. But when we have a good company, and in the competitive arena all things are equal between us and our competition, we need a tool in the toolbox, that being incentives, to help make the difference and close the deal. The long-term business case must be made first to both the prospect and to the community. And here we're talking about coordinating a win-win situation between the community in which the project is going to expand or relocate and the actual company that's looking to expand or relocate. It can't be a one-sided deal, and you look at it both short-term and long-term so that you create a win-win situation. And incentives in creating that win-win situation, they should be used to break the ties when all things otherwise are near par or at par. And they should be leveraged for longevity. You're not looking just at the next 36 months or 60 months. You're looking at 10 years down the road. Here are some facts about incentives. These facts relate to every one of us in this room on an individual basis, just as they do to a business looking at how it must maintain its profit and loss statements. Human behavior is such that we have the motivation to pursue getting a better deal. There's no way of getting around it. It's not smart to pay retail. In fact, if we're paying retail, we're not being smart, and that's all the way down to the individual level. So just as we think individually, corporations and businesses think too. We also have to understand that when incentives are used, and they are used, that you have the thought process that if my compatriot over here got one last year, I should be able to get one this year. So, because I'm going to do at least as well as my compatriot. Business behavior, we have the motivation to pursue incentives, but we also need to realize that in the economic development decision-making process, incentives is just one line item in an overall analytical process about where these businesses are going to expand or relocate. I will tell you very frankly, based upon my experience in the past negotiating incentives with plant relocations and expansions, it is just one of the criteria, and there are a lot of other criteria that have to be negotiated. Companies as well as communities need to look at the return on the investment, and they need these goals stipulated and understood, and they need to be both short-term and long-term in their magnitude. And when communities are sitting down at the table with prospects, it has to be a win-win situation. It is a partnership between that investing business and the community. What are not incentives? Or let me get that right. What not? Incentives that delay are not incentives. If it's not in the ground, if we don't have the ability to deliver today, it's not an incentive. When a prospect hears that the sewer plant will be built in 3 years, that's not an incentive, that's a disincentive. If the site will be assembled to meet your criteria, folks, that's not an incentive, that's a promise that may not be delivered. If there are environmental and remediation activities that need to be handled to make this brownfield site work, it's not an incentive. An incentive is a hard and fast deliverable that is deliverable when you indicate that it is available. Know what matters to whom in the negotiation process between business and the community and the state. What's important to business? The reduced cost and timelines of expansions and relocation, as well as the bottom line revenue picture. What's important to the negotiators, the middle people? Well, often fees and references. What's important to state and local governments here in Georgia? Tax revenues, job creation, and political success. You know, I did economic development in South Georgia back in the late 80s and early 90s, and there our definition of economic development was the creation of jobs. We needed jobs in the rural markets. When I moved to Metro Atlanta in the mid-90s to do economic development in suburban Atlanta, there we didn't have the workforce necessary to fill a lot of high job, high employee requirement facilities. So our definition of economic development was the creation of investment, the creation of wealth that would impact the local tax digest that was getting out of kilter because of escalating residential growth and not commercial and industrial. So when you look at tax revenues, jobs, and political success, that can vary from location to location in Georgia, but it all is tied ultimately to the bottom line of how well you negotiate with the business. What are some of the preferred incentives? Well, certainly cash enhancement to working capital. Terry, you mentioned in California, you know, they dole out cash. We don't really do a lot of that in Georgia. We don't have to because in many respects we are a good state in which business can operate. We've got lower operating costs across the board compared to a lot of our competition. But companies do prefer up front cash enhancements to lower their front-end expenses of expansions or relocations. It's important for a company, when it is expanding or relocating, to be sure that they don't step out of line with the extraordinary one-time cost associated with getting the newer establishments up and running. Infrastructure already in place at the community and state level, when you have that eliminates the need for a lot of incentives. We spend a lot of our energies at the local and state level calling the expansion or extension of utilities and other infrastructure, roads, telecommunication. We call that incentives, but really, if they're already in the ground, they're a benefit that help enhance our competitiveness. What are some of the unexcitable incentives that we do offer? Tax credits they cannot use. Terry, you mentioned we've got great tax credits in Georgia, and we do, but they are cumbersome. They are complicated, and most companies do not make use of them. Strings attached to hiring and purchasing. It is important that at the community and state levels in Georgia, we do have strings attached, but these strings shouldn't be cumbersome, and they should be made known well in front of the negotiation process. They shouldn't be items that come up at the end of or the near end of the discussion. We don't need to dwell upon makeups for lack of public investment in workforce and infrastructure, and I've already touched on that. And then clawbacks presented late in the process. Make sure that we have all of what we desire to come out of that win-win situation made known early in the process. Let's talk a little bit about some of the incentive programs that we have in Georgia. These are tax credits, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because Terry has already touched on them. But you see we have job creation, investment, R&D, corporate headquarters, and I might mention corporate headquarters. One thing that could be done to enhance that tax credit is to make it available not just for corporate headquarters, but for back office operations in Georgia too. It is limited right now just to corporate relocations, and that puts us in Georgia at a non-competitive position. Training and retraining, daycare, ports activities, small business growth. The other column are what other states and some of our competition offer that we don't, and then they're pretty self-explanatory. Other than the comment I would like to make is that a lot of the tax credits offered by our competition are not just targeted to tax liabilities, they're targeted to payroll by those companies, and it would be a lot more beneficial in Georgia and make us more competitive if our tax credits could be tied to payroll exemptions in addition to tax exemptions. What are some of the tax exemptions and abatements that we have in Georgia? Certainly there's the sales and use tax. There's Freeport that is able to be implemented across the board in the state if a local community decides it needs that. Property tax abatement, sales tax on some equipment. We could actually expand the list of available equipment that would qualify for sales tax. Goods in transit and purchase for resales. What are some tax exemption that other states in our competition have? They have payroll withholding. They have energy charges that are qualified for sales tax exemption. Construction materials. If you look at the ability of other states to pass on construction sales tax exemptions, it really puts us at a competitive disadvantage because we don't offer that. Goods in transit, all modes, not just that is waterborne. Pollution equipment and tax equalization. What's a recap of Georgia's tax incentives? In Georgia, businesses produce about 20% of the state's revenues. Incentives forgive about 10% of that 20%. And frankly speaking, about 1 in 2,000 businesses qualify for the incentives, most of the incentives. And out of those, only 1 in 5 eligible companies take any of the credits. That's, as Terry said, something that we can really work on across the board with our statewide incentives package. There are less incentives as a pass-through feature to facilitate economic expansion into Georgia is less than 2% of the state tax revenues. What's the right amount when we're talking about incentives? Well, you need to know at the community level and at the state level what your ultimate goals are, and do those goals coincide with the strategy that you have in place for economic development activity. They need to coincide. You can't just shoot from the hip because something looks attractive. It's got to be goal and strategic oriented. Know what the project is worth both in financial and financial terms. And that's important because economic development is both quantitative as well as qualitative, and we need to understand that. You need to correctly assess the indirect costs and benefits of passing on incentives to further economic development activity. With every gain, there is an investment, and you need to understand what that is clearly. Is the project viewed from an investment perspective or a community development perspective? I will say this, there was a lot of criticism of Alabama when it first threw out all of the statewide incentives that seemed so gargantuan and didn't make business sense when they located Mercedes several years ago. But ultimately, the leaders that were involved in those discussions several years ago realized that they were making a longer-term investment in the Alabama economy by granting short-term allowances that seemed out of kilter. But if you look at what has happened within that industry in the state of Alabama, it was a pretty good investment for that state. Every time that you work to expand or relocate a business, you need to do a cost-benefit analysis so that you can better understand, again, the return on the investment that you're making with the business. There is a measurable impact effect. That's the quantitative aspect of economic development, and these are some of the criteria that should be involved and engaged in a cost-benefit analysis. And you need to always ask these questions. What are the impacts to jobs, income, housing, and what are the multiplier effects at the local, regional, and state levels? What are the fiscal impacts in terms of tax revenues that will be generated? But conversely, what's the cost of providing infrastructure and other services to those businesses? And then what are the government policy impacts that come out of the process? New taxes, education, environment, traffic, growth control. These are all factors that have to be considered before you really get too far into the incentives game. What closes the deal when we're sitting across the table from a manufacturing employer? Well, one, competitive cost and attractive operating conditions. That helps close the deal. We are fortunate in Georgia that we have this environment. We are competitive from a cost perspective, and we do have attractive operating conditions in Georgia. We have proper incentives. Can they be enhanced? Yes. Hopefully that will be an outcome of these hearings that you have. We can always enhance that which we have, but we have a pretty good tool. Let's just work to enhance that tool. Coordination and professional responses and correspondence between our local community economic development practitioners, our state economic development practitioners, our elected officials with the prospects that we're working with. That type of interface helps to close the deal quickly and decisively. There's always got to be a confidence level that the state and local team can deliver on the commitments made across the board that include incentives, but a lot of other aspects also. And then there's got to be the confidentiality aspect to help close the deal. Economic development is a process of elimination. It's not a process of selection. And it's important to stay in that process of elimination by being competitive. A company will start with a list of 20 to 30, sometimes 50 potential locations for an expansion or a relocation. And the site selection consultant or the corporate VP of real estate, it's his or her job to narrow that long list down to a short list of workable, manageable companies that they really begin investigating. So economic development as a process in terms of deciding where the business is to be directed, it is a process of elimination. It's not a process of choice until the very end. And our role is to use the tools that we have in our toolbox to stay on that short list. Incentives, that's one of the tools, but it is a tool that's not going away. The use of good incentives in wise ways makes us remain the competitive state that we are. I have for the members of the committee, and I'll give these to Abby, some information on incentives that is included in a new handbook that was published this year by the University of Georgia's Fanning Institute. It's the Georgia Development Authority Handbook, but there is a chapter in here that I have made copies of for all of you on the committee that was written by practitioners at the local and state level in Georgia that detail more specifically than I did some of the specific incentives that we have in Georgia and the reasons that they are there, and most importantly, the reasons that they do not need to go away. And I would add then, too, also before I close, that the Georgia Economic Developers Association has a competitiveness, a list of competitiveness issues for members of the General Assembly that relate to public policy in the incentives arena. And I know that's been made available to you, but I would encourage you to review that because it represents the best that the economic development community has put together in terms of enhancing the good products, the good tools that we have under the incentives banner that's already in our toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. Let me express my gratitude to all those who have presented so far. At this point, I'm going to ask that we take about a 10-minute break before we kind of switch gears and the committee moves up here to the table. And of course, we'll be hearing next from some quick start folks from DT, Department of Technical and Adult Education. So let's take about a 10-minute break and we'll regroup here in just a moment. Thank you.
is this gonna be good? Are they gonna have stuff on the, are they gonna have stuff on the deal?
No, it shouldn't. Abby said that was the last PowerPoint.
So happy to be here, Lou.
These are hot. Why didn't he go?
Well, yeah, I was thinking, do we know that they're not going to, I mean, I can do it with this thing,
Jackie
but I was
said they're
going
not
to,
using
okay, was it function?
it was,
Yes.
F8 was supposed to take it off there, but, and then, but Save the Bee's not working.
Is it function B?
Could be.
Nope.
Are we all set? All righty, we'll go ahead and get started back here with this committee meeting. At this point, we're going to ask our next speakers or presenters if they would come up and take the podium and just identify themselves again. I know we have you here on the itinerary, but for the group, just do that. So I'm trying to remember my instruction. Flora, are you going first? Please come right up here and go right ahead.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Athens, Georgia. I am Flora Tidings, president of Athens Technical College, and I'd like to tell you that I think we are the best incentive that Georgia has going. We are workforce and economic development. That is our mission. That's what we do every day. I'd like to just take a second to kind of tie in what you heard this morning from the University of Georgia and what Athens Technical College is doing in Northeast Georgia to promote biomanufacturing and life sciences in this area. We have been involved in biomanufacturing and life science for approximately 15 years. We have been one of the only technical colleges doing this in the state of Georgia for the length of time that we've been involved. Now, recently, several other colleges have started to offer these programs. We've been partnering with Gwinnett Tech so that we can put together a very substantial program that would cover the 316 corridor. Now, the reason you need to know why this is important is this morning you heard all about the research. You heard what's going on, what the PhDs are doing. Well, what I'm here to tell you is that for every one PhD that you have employed in the state, you need 16 lab techs to support that position. So the bulk of the workforce needs to come from the technical college arena. That's a 2-year associate degree training that individuals can come into our college, be trained, go out, and make anywhere from $50,000 to $65,000 a year in employment. These are wonderful opportunities for the communities in our state and opportunities that we need to be able to afford the workforce in this area. Currently, we do have about 36 companies in this area that we consider small companies that are involved in workforce training. They employ our graduates at this point, and I know many of you have seen in the papers that we have been trying to attract some of the larger companies in biomanufacturing and workforce development to this area. We hope to be very successful in that, but again, we need to continue to grow. We need to be able to offer that workforce to them. I do currently have a building in the pipeline. It is at the top of the list for the Department of Technical Adult Education. It is a biomanufacturing and life science building that would afford us the opportunity to grow in that area. Every year, I have to turn away approximately 1,000 students in my allied health and life sciences area. These are students that are qualified to enter into our programs. They've taken their core courses with me. They have a GPA that gives them the high enough grade point average to be in our programs. I simply don't have the space to put them. When we had a company that came here and looked at us several months ago and they made the decision to go to a neighboring state, we were all quite disappointed, and we were told that one of the main issues was the workforce was not large enough to accommodate their needs. We have the manpower. What we need is more space to train that manpower. Most of those 1,000 students probably would have gone into the biomanufacturing arena had there been a job opportunity available for them, because as you also are well aware, with the Department of Technical and Adult, placement is another area that we're very concerned with. We train people to go to work. So if there are not jobs available, we don't train them to go into those areas. So it has got to be a hand-in-hand partnership with the companies coming and the training being available almost simultaneously. We're very fortunate in the state of Georgia to have under the Department of Technical and Adult the area of Quick Start and Economic Development. Jackie Rahowski is going to come up and talk to you now about the opportunities that Quick Start allows us in the state to get our workforce up and running very quickly. Jackie?
If I could 1 second before you leave, Dr. Tidings, did anyone on the committee have a question of Dr. Tidings before she steps down? Were you planning on coming back?
I will be here to answer questions if you have anything that you would like for me to.
Well, thank you. We just appreciate that availability, and thank you for what you do. So go ahead. Please, come on.
Hi, I'm Jackie Rahowski. I'm Assistant Commissioner, Economic Development Programs with the Department of Technical and Adult Education. And I'm here today on behalf of Mike Fulmer, our Commissioner, who was unable to join us. And Mike asked me to join you today for 2 reasons. One, because I run Georgia's Quick Start program, which means that all of the companies that the Georgia Department of Economic Development is trying to recruit to the state, we get to work with them. We get to work with them day in and day out. That's what we do. We work with Georgia's manufacturings. The second reason he asked me to speak to you today is I had the opportunity to work with about 20 manufacturers from around the state of Georgia, and we ran focus groups about a year ago. And one of the things that I have to give to the committee, I'm not going to go over this, I'm not doing a formal briefing, but I have a full report from those manufacturers on what's important. What are the things the state of Georgia are doing for manufacturers that make them successful? What are the things that are obstacles to manufacturing performance, successful performance? And what are the future kinds of things we need to be working on? Things that nobody's identified and the state's not working on right now. This is a full report. And one of the things, when we run focus groups with manufacturing, the only thing we listen to is the voice of manufacturing. And so as a result, today I'm not going to do a briefing on Quick Start or anything like that, but when I was asked by the chairman to put some information together for this group, and they wanted to hear about manufacturing and what's important to manufacturing. So what do? You bring manufacturing to the table, and that's exactly what we did. So first, you're going to hear from 2 manufacturers, and these are manufacturers that have been recently recruited to the state of Georgia. So they've looked at the incentive packages. They have direct experience with the incentive packages, and they know what's important to manufacturing because they run these businesses. They're presidents of their companies. And then after you hear from the manufacturers, we're going to switch gears, new industry. We're going to switch gears and look at existing industry. And we have Russell Vandiver and Dave from Caterpillar, and they're going to talk about something brand new. It's called the Center of Innovation for Manufacturing Excellence. And guess what? That was one of the things that when we ran the focus groups that the manufacturers recommended that we do in Georgia, that we create this center, and the governor was able to deliver. So I think that's pretty powerful. And as I said, all this work was done for the Commission for New Georgia on behalf of Governor Sonny Perdue. And with that, I have said enough, and I want to turn it over to the people that matter. And with that, Jim Hawk is going to be the first speaker. And Jim is with Toyo Tire, and it's a fabulous company.
Jim, please come up here. And while you're coming up here, I will just point out to know that I'm the representative that proudly gets to represent Toyo Tire up in the 15th District of Bartow County.
We're actually in Jeff's hometown.
That's right. I grew up right down the road from there. So please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is James Hawk, Jim Hawk, and I'm Vice President of Operations and Plant Manager for Toyo Tire. We established a new manufacturing facility in White, Georgia, pretty substantial. It was a $200 million investment. First phase. We currently have about 400 employees. We broke ground in October of '04 and achieved our first production 1 year. Very aggressive, and we're less than 2 years later, about 20 months, we're at full production. So it's a very, very aggressive, very fast-track project. This company decided to locate in Georgia because of the consumer market in the United States. Heretofore, Toyo is about a $3 billion company globally, manufacturing automotive and truck tires. North America is the largest consumer market in the world, and prior to that, all of the Toyo products were imported from either China or Japan. So it was about time to establish a manufacturing base. The feasibility study could have easily dictated this plant be built in China, Brazil, Philippines, Thailand, but a lot of factors. Transportation was a major factor. Importing light truck tires that go as much as 100 pounds, not economically feasible and getting worse as far as transportation by ship, getting them through customs, through the ports into North America. So it was decided to establish a manufacturing base. The other contributing factor was a very, very high degree of automation. Our business is very mature, heavy manufacturing. Previously, very labor intensive. Our company's been on the leading edge and developed some very highly automated processes, which made it competitive to put in this aggressive labor market in North America. The feasibility, let me give you some insight. Manufacturers like us, especially heavy manufacturers, it's a permanent investment. We just can't necessarily bolt down and then a couple months later decide to move our process. You know, we're here for good. You don't pack up and move a $200 million operation just because you don't like to work for us. So we're here for good. So it was a major decision. So the decision was regionally. Okay, what part of the United States makes sense for our growth? Our company will continue to import products from China, Japan, the Far East. So this is all incremental business. So it was targeted the East and particularly the Southeast United States. Economic incentives, of course, are important, and the tiebreaker depends on which state has the best to offer. Our company really didn't get greedy. You know, we weren't really interested. We were only interested in fair economic incentives, not this bidding war that you see with other large manufacturers. Our feasibility study boiled down to between Alabama and Georgia, and there were two major things that really tipped the scale. First was transportation. Obviously, if you look at the southeastern U.S., Georgia, in particular Atlanta, there's major interstate highways, major rail. There's Port of Savannah, which is a hidden jewel for Georgia. And transportation was a major issue in getting our raw materials in and consumer products out. The other major factor was Quick Start. We did not have time, resources, or the money to organize our own training program. This would have taken months, if not years ahead, to organize all this activity. Japanese are very methodical, and once they'll take months and years to make a decision, but once they pull the trigger, they expect to go. So having made this decision, we put all of our resources into building, process development, getting this plant up and running, and the advantage of Quick Start is they took all the burden of organizing, the training, the instructors, the materials. They even visited our facilities in Japan to prepare these materials for us, and it took that tremendous burden off of us. We simply did not have to worry about organizing the training effort. Saved us months, at least 6 months, if not a year worth of effort. And that's something that you really need to promote. It was a tremendous, tremendous asset to us. Obstacles that I see now that we're here, the incentive packages, as I say, were very fair. We did not really barter one state against the other. It was a matter of give us your best deal, and then again, transportation and the training were major decisions for us. I see transportation a growing issue for us now that we're here. We import a lot of raw materials from the Far East. Natural rubber, which is an agricultural product which is grown in tropical countries, is a major ingredient in our products. The Port of Savannah, having close proximity, is a major asset to us. It saves us cost. We don't have to truck raw materials across the United States. We simply receive them into Savannah, and a couple hours later, they're here. That was an advantage for us. Shipping products out is another issue for us. So we have, one of our criteria was rail access. So we are directly located right near a CSX major rail line. There was a rail siding that had to be built for us because, again, we receive and ship out by rail. But truck traffic is a growing concern, especially getting in and around the city of Atlanta. But more of a consideration for our employees, how to get to work. So I would encourage some additional funding and more thoughtful studies on transportation in this area. We're in northern Georgia, in Bartow County, so it hasn't affected us too bad yet. But no doubt it will. There's a lot of growth coming that direction. One thing that we did not anticipate, the state has been really very good to work with. State agencies, Economic Development Department, Quick Start. However, another thing that I could encourage the state to do is assign a so-called project manager. There's a lot of red tape that we had to cut through. We had infrastructure that was promised to us, developments, sewer, water, rail, highway improvements, nothing major, just entrance improvements. We dealt with Georgia Power, dealt with the railroads. Georgia Power did an outstanding job. But there was a lot of legal fees. Every time we had to deal with any of these agencies, it's like, have your lawyer talk to our lawyer. A big part of our project, too, was an industrial revenue bond that helped us finance our project. And I think in retrospect, if we would have considered and known about the legal fees that went along with that industrial revenue bond, we could have gone out and gotten our own financing probably just as competitive. That was a big surprise, the amount of legal fees and the attorneys involved in every step of this process. Bartow County has a joint development authority which was very helpful in promoting this project, getting us a site on the infrastructure. They're growing. They're not as mature as I'm sure some larger counties, so a little bit of help from the state, probably a project manager, so to speak, to help us coordinate and cut through all these activities. Our sewer project was 3 months late, and our rail siding was 9 months late. Fortunately, we were able to survive and keep our project on schedule in spite of all that, but that's something that was just a bit of a disappointment and could be accelerated in the future. Again, I think in retrospect, $200 million project, we easily spent over $5 million in attorney's fees. Very, very unexpected. Just the fees that went along with this industrial revenue bond were a shock. So I would encourage some restraint in that matter, or even some legislation to limit those kind of fees. Again, the Quick Start training was better than we expected. I've worked in the states of Ohio, Illinois, Virginia, and the cash is certainly inviting, but we were not interested in the cash because that's just something more that we would have had to have done. We would have had to hire training people. We would have had to prepare training materials. We would have had to hire instructors. And that's simply one thing that we just didn't have to worry about. It was a huge advantage to us. And startup organizations like ours, we have currently about 400 employees. And we were able to dedicate all of our resources and time into hiring, training, in getting our production up to speed and minimizing our startup losses. And the training part of it was just invaluable. I can't say enough about how special that was to us. In the area of workforce development, I do have a concern, and this is not just Georgia, although there are some alarming statistics here in Georgia, but I have seen the same things in other states. Manufacturing jobs, we run 24/7 operations. A lot of people, a lot of the young people coming out of school, they like to work Monday through Friday day jobs. And somebody has to continue our operations. We made a huge investment, so to maximize our investment, we run continuous operations. That's tough, to hire people to work in those working conditions. We went through 13,000 applications to hire 400 employees. Now, every new manufacturer likes to say, we are going to hire the best and the brightest. And we feel that we did, but we were very fair about it. We didn't get too extreme on our criteria. Our main criteria, only about 15% of our initial 400 jobs require technical degrees, engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers, like so. The rest of them are straight manufacturing jobs, which require high school education or GED equivalent. I was shocked at the high school dropout rates in rural Georgia. I know in Bartow County alone, it's in excess of 40%. So that's a concern. So Jackie mentioned the study that was done and recommendations, and I was pleased to be part of it. And a part of that recommendation is to, for the state education system to reach way down, even into junior high level, to promote and do some developmental training towards getting people into manufacturing jobs. Not everyone is suited to go to college. The Hope Scholarship in Georgia is a wonderful thing, but for 90% of our workforce, we do not require or hire college graduates. We need technicians. We need manufacturing workers. They have to have basic education and decent motivation. So this high school dropout rate and the qualifications of people in our area is a major concern to me. We intend to grow. Our initial project, our $200 million investment, is referred to as phase 1 of 4. And we expect in 10 years to invest upwards of $450 million and have 1,000 employees. That represents a pretty substantial sales of that facility would be in excess of $450 million a year to $500 million a year. So where are these people going to come from is a concern for me. We were able to staff up for now, but where are the rest going to come from is a concern. Another niche that I'm even more deeply concerned about, and it's a national issue, are technician level people, especially maintenance technicians. Part of our feasibility study, which allows us to build this plant in the United States, was automation. Our facility has half of the normal employment of labor-intensive equivalent business of ours. Very, very high degree of automation, a lot of robotics. Finding and attracting and training maintenance technicians to work on all this robotic equipment, electronics, PLCs, servo drives, all those acronyms are tough. And they are not enough in the United States as well as this area. So we've been working with Metro Tech to screen and develop and train, and internally we have no choice. We're going to have to develop our own so-called apprenticeship program to try to develop this skill and this craft. But that's a major issue for heavy manufacturers like us, is where are we going to get trained maintenance technicians to work on this robotic equipment? It can, and in some cases does require electrical engineers, but electrical engineers do not want to work Saturdays, Sundays, off shifts. So we need to create and we need to promote a technician, better technician training programs and to motivate people clear into junior high and high school. Okay, here's a good job. I mean, these are jobs, our manufacturing jobs pay $40,000 to $50,000 a year with excellent benefits. The technician level jobs, these maintenance technicians, easily in the $50,000 to $75,000 range. So these are great jobs. But getting people to work into these areas, get the training, and to work these continuous operations is darn difficult. So I would encourage our education system, how can we deal with this issue, and how can we reach into the junior high and high schools to help with that situation. That's a concern for us, is how are we going to grow? We are going to grow. We're not in a Me Too market. We make automotive and light truck tires, but we serve very different niche markets. We're not just after volume. We have very, very select high-performance products, very technically complex. We make tires that go on Land Rovers, Lexuses, Navigators, Hummers. You know, it's pretty sophisticated stuff. So we are going to grow. It's just a question of can the workforce and can the community grow with us as fast as we need to and can grow. I would encourage you to maintain, if not to increase the funding to Quick Start. I sound like a poster child for Jackie, but it's a hidden jewel. It's a marvelous program. Again, I've worked in the states of Illinois, Ohio, and Virginia, and what's popular there are grants, and there's formulas for the grants based on new jobs and bricks and mortar, and really that doesn't interest me. The cash, I have no interest in. I need somebody to really help me with the training so I can focus my efforts on workforce development, getting into business faster and growing our volume.
Good.
So please keep it up, and I would certainly, in your economic development efforts, promote the use of Quick Start, because it was a major, major decision in this decision between Alabama and Georgia. Last but not least, workers' compensation. It's fair in the state of Georgia, and I would encourage you to keep it fair. Keep it fair for the employees. Safety is a priority of our business and ourselves, but just please help us keep it fair. I've worked in other states, and it is not fair. Can I answer any questions or give any insight?
Thank you, Jim. I think to start, Representative Smith, do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Hawk, for being here. You had a couple of questions, and one was you alluded to the problem you had with red tape relating to sewer and then the railroad. Was that, how much of that was attributed to federal, state, and local? And the second, let me answer that one.
It was just getting everybody on the same page. I mean, everybody had a common agenda, but then there's permitting processes, and the rail was quite difficult because there was land acquisitions. That was all being handled by the JDA, but then the issuing of all that work and the diligence in maintaining a schedule. You have to sign agreements and separate contracts with the railroad. It was just getting all the parties on the same page, in the same room, on the same schedule. That was difficult. That was difficult. So one thing that would have helped would have been a project manager at the state level, not the local level, the state level, to say, okay, I know the parties involved, and I'll get them in the same room and I'll get it handled for you. Everybody had the same goal and same motivation. It was just getting them all on the same schedule and on the same page at one time.
I noticed I saw a number of heads bobbing up and down. I think they really agree with what you're saying, that maybe perhaps the state does need to have some type of collaboration there.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment on the project manager. That's something that really hadn't clicked with me until you started mentioning it, because I was, a little bit close to that process, and I can see the value in what I thought I heard you say of a project manager that may coordinate the efforts between state and local government, and particularly the various agencies you deal with in state government. One question I have of you, and this was mentioned with our last presenter, is the issue of confidentiality. And if you would real briefly just explain if that was an important issue for Toyo Tire in the early stages of negotiations, and how critical the issue may have been.
Extremely important. Our business, tire manufacturing, it sounds pretty simple. It's a product that's taken for granted, but it's very technically complex product, and where you get your edge is in marketing. And there's many of our competitors, U.S. manufacturers, that are going offshore as fast as they can go and dumping their United States, North American operations. So it takes a good 2 years to get to full production once you break ground. And there's 6 months to a year's worth of negotiations and planning go before that. So if your competitors know that you're increasing your volume in the U.S., they got about a 2 to 3 year head start on you to try to counteract that additional volume coming into the market. So maintaining confidentiality, especially on a new facility, is extremely important, very important. And I know that's a tough issue, and it was a tough issue for your community, Jeff, because a lot of the negotiations they felt were done in secret. And what are you giving away that they didn't know about? But it's extremely important. And again, the economic incentives were fair. They weren't outrageous. They were very fair.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I do agree that there's quite a distinction between confidential negotiations and something that is secret. And in this project, that there was nothing secret, but certainly the value of confidentiality existed, as it does in most projects like this. Representative Martin, do you have a follow-up or a question?
If I could, Mr. Hawk, just to follow up on your project manager, I'm getting a little feedback here as well, but your thought of a project manager is what we're really talking about there as well, something that the Economic Development Group could do at the State Craig Lester's group, not only to project manage, but in business, somewhere 4, 5, 6 years ago, they developed the terminology of customer relationship management, where you really go full circle. You win the deal, you implement the deal, then at the end you go back and look at how it went into process, so that when you do the next deal, you know the things that you've done. Did we do that well enough as a state? And I know Craig and the group do a great job, but could we get better at
Yes,
not only project managing, adding that individual, but following through on your situation, so the next group that comes to Georgia,
well, they did a great job in the beginning, because some of the states we dealt with steered you to where they wanted this project to be. And Georgia, in the beginning, I think, Charlie, you offered, 17 different sites throughout the state of Georgia. So it was like, here, these all meet your criteria, take your pick. So that was done correctly. And all of the discussions and all the negotiations in the beginning were done right and very fair. Then you get into, okay, how do we implement this project? And I think you need more of a technical person involved that's been involved in construction and has dealt with municipalities and can get all of these folks on the same page. I mean, everybody had the same interest. But you're dealing with chambers of commerce, joint development authorities, railroad officials, Department of Transportation officials, utilities. I don't have time to fool with all that, but I had to. And then, unfortunately, you have to get attorneys involved in every step of the way. So they serve a purpose, but the expense and the extra time it took to coordinate all that activity, we just didn't anticipate. It would have been easier, in my view, if we had a state representative that had some technical experience that could have helped us cut through all of that.
One last question, Representative Smith.
Mr. Morris, with the Fanning Institute, listed a number of incentives and things that you as a business leader look to come into a community, and you can go down the list and check it off, but what really made you feel good about going to Cartersville and that area with this plant? What was the one thing that really stood out as something that made you make your final decision?
Well, I think most of the negotiations were done directly with our Japanese parents, and I think they really felt good about the relationship with the state of Georgia officials. Made them feel good, made them feel comfortable. They were very responsive, and there was a lot of trust that was developed there. As far as the area, it was chosen purely because of transportation. It served, you look at a map, this is the market that we want to go after. This is, it's got rail, it's got major interstate highways, this is where we need to be. But I really think it was the relationship and the trust that was built with the state of Georgia officials that made the deal.
Jim, thank you for being here and giving us a presentation on your insight to business incentives and economic development.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Phil, is that right? Yeah. Okay. Please come up. Next, we have Phil Wolford, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, plant manager in another community that's near and dear to me, Adairsville, Georgia. Not technically in the House district I represent, but it's within rock throwing distance.
Right.
So Phil, you go right ahead.
Thank you.
For being here.
And technically, the people in Gordon County would like for me to remind you that we're in Calhoun, Georgia. But our address is Adairsville, Georgia. But we're right in between those two metropolises up there. Actually, I've had the privilege of going through 2 Quick Start programs. I'm presently the plant manager of LG Chem Industrial Materials in Calhoun, Georgia. But I came from the Suzuki project over in Rome. I was director of Suzuki Manufacturing of America Corporation there. LG, however, we have about 74 employees now. We started up exactly, well, our grand opening was exactly a year ago last week, and it represented about a $40 million investment, an initial investment, because right now what we make at our plant is LG Hymax. That's a competitor to DuPont Corian, solid surface materials. If you go in Lowe's, you'll see Formica, DuPont, and the best product, LG Hymax, there. And I say it's our first product because one of the keys for us locating there was, of course, the availability of a suitable location. Our environment will most likely be a campus-type environment with multiple buildings and facilities there. If you ever come to our facility, you'll see pictures of all our facilities in Korea. And, you know, there's 18 to 19 buildings covering 200 acres for the typical LG plant. Our plant, we currently have 35 acres with the option for 50 more. We're a single plant right now, but there are visions for about 8 buildings there, including a U.S. headquarters. Because this is LG's first manufacturing plant in the United States. Reasons for locating where we did, and I think this is going to be typical for most businesses, including Suzuki. Access to our market. Our end user market is, of course, very important. And things that influence that are transportation routes and where our customers are located. Of course, freight and airlines and ports affect that as well. But also access to labor force, a labor force of skilled people, but also a labor force of trainable people. Of course, we're always looking for economical labor rates because we're not competing with Tennessee or Alabama or South Carolina. We're competing with China, Thailand. These are sorts of folks that when a foreign manufacturer especially looks at locating a plant in the United States, they're looking at all the transportation issues and all the economics there, and labor is one of those. So we have to recognize that we are competing with folks that have lower labor rates. Therefore, folks like Toyo need that level of automation. Our plant is about 98% automated. Our product's hardly ever touched by a human. One of those reasons is it weighs 123 pounds, so it's tough to handle that. Access to the market, of course, is one. Labor force, availability of suitable location, I mentioned, where we could have multiple manufacturing sites co-located there. things that influence these three key factors, of course, I said interstates, ports, airports. Training was one. Georgia Quick Start, as I said, I've been through 2 of those now and have nothing but accolades for those folks. They do a great job. And I think they were a major component of the decision for Georgia because both in Suzuki's case and LG's case, other areas were being looked at. I wasn't involved in the ones up front on those, however. The other one is cooperative government and private entities in these areas. I know in both cases of these companies that I've worked for, when I've asked why did you locate here, they always maintain the positive Georgia state government and the local authorities that seem genuine in wanting to work with them. The things that the state does good, Georgia Quick Start program, again, it provides basic training very quickly and economically. We have a good overall economic development program here at the state and local levels. And I have to include Georgia Power in that and people like Atlanta Gas Light and some of the private firms that we often turn to Georgia Power for their economic development division for advice on different things as well. Incentives, of course, are a part of it. And I'd like to echo a little bit about what Mr. Hawk said. Incentives are something that you have to stay in the game. It's kind of like advertising. It's something you have to do. You wonder sometimes if it's effective or not, but if it's not there, you're not in the ballgame. So I think they're a key component of it. It has to be competitive, but without those first couple of things, the marketplace and the labor force, you wouldn't get looked at to start with. As far as what things do we need to look at, actually what things that the state controls that are obstacles, I think even though our local officials do a good job, there still needs to be continuing economic development training for our local officials. Something along the level of working with foreign manufacturers. I mean, we struggle internally ourselves, even we're working with the different cultures, but I think our local county officials need some of that training as well, and that could really lead to some better cooperations. We also need to recognize that part of that is that the location of a major manufacturing facility, while it's great for for the county where it's actually located, there are jobs created at those manufacturing facilities that have a wide effect in a region. I'll give you an example. At Suzuki, 30% of our workforce came from Rome, but 25% came from Calhoun, another 15% from Cartersville, I think 5% from Somerville, Cedartown area. So we have a big draw. I'm sure that Toyo does that as well. So yeah, it's nice to get that prize, but we have to recognize that we're regional employers. And things that affect us, again, go back to those transportation routes. We've got to make sure that we have ways for our employees to get to work, economical ways for them to get to work, and things such as daycare and things like that come into play. The other thing I see is that there's always multiple layers of approvals needed whenever you go to do something. You always have state and federal, that's a given, but then there's a lot of local ones too. Fire marshals, building inspectors, and we had to do a lot of training of our local folks because we were using some fairly advanced techniques in some areas of our plant. And granted, it was things that they had never seen before and had not run up against before. So we had to do a lot of training of our local officials on some of the techniques we were actually using. So maybe there's some things that the state can do there, and having, again, this project manager type concept I think is a good one, because then that person can help get the training for a local official if that local fire official is not familiar with this technology. Maybe it was used in another community in Georgia, and so we can utilize those resources and leverage them. I think one key thing too that being involved with three startups here in Georgia over my lifetime, we all know there are environmental laws we have to deal with, but one of the good things I think that the EPD could do is establish a new business startup assistance program. It's tough just to get a check sheet of what all you need to do. You end up hiring consultants, getting more and more expense in the startup, and the EPD does a great job overall, in helping companies as much as they can, but I don't think it's a mission of theirs. They need to separate a business assistance mission from the enforcement and the permitting side. And again, that's where this project manager could also become of assistance there. And then the last item I was asked to address things we need for future success. We hear a lot of talk about grades in schools. Well, I can tell you, one of my biggest frustrations is discipline and absenteeism and insubordination. We have that same thing in the high schools, middle schools. We need to address it. Because guess what? Those people graduate, they become our employees. It doesn't go away just because I'm paying them. So the idea of passing those people along and not ever having a good discipline program or a good absentee program in the schools just is not going to cut it, because I can get people, but I can't get people that'll stay and come to work sometimes. This is a little bit less of a state issue, more of a federal rule, but overtime rules and work rules now are really become antiquated. The 40-hour work week just doesn't exist anymore, especially in manufacturing. We run 12-hour shifts. I think Toyo does also. And so there needs to be some flexibility there in that to be able to have people fit schedules that they want to work, but sometimes economically we can't have them work those because of the overtime costs that are involved. I would echo again transportation issues. I said the same thing as director of Suzuki. We don't need money to study things. We need money to do things. There's not enough doers here. It frustrates foreign manufacturers because they can get things done very quickly in their own countries. I understand the need to study, but there comes a time when you stop studying and get something done. In my own area, since I was this big, or maybe this big, they've been talking about the 411 connection that goes from Rome to Carsville into I-75. They're still studying it. We're getting closer, but they're still studying it. We've got to have a viable east-west connector between 75 and 85. And now, you know, at Suzuki, we had trucks stuck in traffic on 285 and 75. I had 200 people standing around waiting for parts in a just-in-time facility because they were stuck in traffic in Atlanta. So east-west connectors, and truly now, 285 is no longer a bypass around Atlanta. It is Atlanta. We need a better bypass around Atlanta for parts flowing to these manufacturers. Southeast has become a very major player in the automotive marketplace and will continue to be. All those plants rely upon just-in-time manufacturing. They rely on trucks to deliver. And then a pet peeve of mine is labor force availability. After you've been in a community for 6 months, you're now an existing industry. So we have new plants competing with the old established plants, which of course is the problem. But we have new plants competing with new plants. So we need to think about targeting incentives toward available labor pools. Because if you're going to build a plant, it takes you 2 years to do that. The labor availability can change drastically in a 2 to 3 year period from the time you start to build your plant to the time you start it up. I think the Georgia Department of Labor operations could be reviewed to see where they can have an effect on the availability of labor force. Truthfully, in all my positions as directors and plant managers, we don't look first at the Georgia Department of Labor, and that's a shame because I know there's a lot of great people there and some programs that they should be leading that effort. And just 2 more items. Educating foreign company officials on U.S. and Georgia laws and regulations is something that's needed that maybe Quick Start can take a look at. And then, again, now I'm an existing industry, so I would say let's don't forget our existing industries when we're looking at incentives as well. Thank you.
Phil, thank you. Any quick questions from the committee? All right. Phil, thank you for doing that. I'll just have one thing I'll say. Advertising is always effective.
Okay. Very good.
I'm in the advertising business. So.
Okay. Very good.
But thank you so much. I appreciate you raising some of those points there. A lot of that are points that I really needed to hear, and I think I can say the same for the rest of the members. Moving right along next, Russell Vandiver, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Vice President of Economic Development at Lanier Technical College. Welcome to the podium, and go right ahead.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with y'all. I want to make a few comments. Actually, I think Jackie sort of did me in. She put me in the middle of all these manufacturers, and I think y'all probably don't want to hear what I have to say, but I'm going to try to tell you how committed I am to manufacturing. About 30 years ago, I came to Lanier Tech and started my career there, and 30 years later, I'm still at Lanier Tech. One of the things that's very important in our area is manufacturing, because it's one of the few ways in this country that you actually create wealth, one of about 3. And we've been very successful over the years recruiting companies and getting locations there in our area and all over North Georgia in manufacturing. I think I've probably worked with about 350 quick start companies, and we probably trained over 40,000 new jobs. And it used to be that you had low wages and cheap land, and that's the way you got companies in Georgia back in the 70s and early 80s. All that's changed. If you'd asked me 30 years ago, what's your definition of economic development, I'd talk about creating jobs. Now, if you ask me what's my definition of economic development, it's how many jobs can you keep that you were able to recruit to Georgia? Because we've lost jobs all over North Georgia, all over the state of Georgia. And we lost them to foreign competition. We lost them to other states. We lost them to not doing a very good job of, as the gentleman just said, taking care of the existing companies, which become existing companies after 6 months. And one of the things that we feel like is really important now is we talk with companies. The report that Jackie mentioned tells us that everyone's having to use technology to be competitive. And if you don't do that, you're going to lose out on those jobs. One of the things that happened about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we're very aggressive in our area about talking with existing companies and finding out what those needs are. And the more companies we talk with, the more we heard the same story. I'm going out and I'm buying robotics, and I'm buying advanced manufacturing equipment. And I'm doing this so that I can be competitive with China and India and whoever else. Because if I don't, we're going to lose those jobs. And so the companies have gone out and they've invested the money in this equipment. But there's a problem. You got to have human capital to operate the equipment. And what we've created in a lot of industries is this big gap between where the human capital is and where the equipment's ability is. So if you spend $120 million on equipment and it's still operating at 20% capacity, what have you really done? Not a whole lot. About a year ago, we opened the Center of Innovation for Manufacturing Excellence. It's the first center of innovation that's actually located on a technical college campus. And when we opened this facility, we put a lot of attention to going around and talking with the companies and matching up the equipment we put in the facility with what's really out there, what is being done today in manufacturing. You're about to hear from what I think is probably one of the biggest success stories in the state of Georgia, and that's Caterpillar. And Dave Vebrock's going to come up and talk with you about that. But we went to Dave's plant and we looked at the robots that he has there. And we matched that up exactly with what they're doing so that every program we do in the center is customized to those needs. But we went one better. Instead of trying to look at getting funding from the state, we actually are charging companies fees for doing training. What a unique idea. Let me tell you, companies are already doing training and they're paying for it before the Center of Innovation ever was put in place. And so we're going to be able to be self-sustaining based on the fees that we're charging companies, which saves them money and therefore becomes an incentive in the state of Georgia that they're paying for. Companies don't mind paying for training. Y'all pay for training all the time. If it's the right kind of training and it meets your needs and you can actually see some return on your investment of what you're doing. So with that, I'm going to sit down and bring Dave Vebrock up here. He's a facilities manager at Caterpillar, and he's going to talk to you about what they do there. Dave?
Russell, thank you for that. And Dave, please come up and talk to us.
Can you help me with this, please? Oh,
We're going to do a little setup here, if you don't mind. Take a little moment. I want to show you what we make. And let you see what manufacturing really is all about. That's not what we make. this is. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a moment. One more thing I brought along.
Will that thing crank that you're putting together?
What?
Will it crank up?
If it does, we're all in trouble. It'll go all over. Okay, I'd like to hit 3 points today. First of all, I want to talk about the importance of manufacturing to the local economy. Then I want to use our company and our products to connect that with the global economy, because they really are connected very closely. And then third, I want to talk about the impact of that global situation, because it has a huge impact on us as an existing company. Who used to play with dump trucks, dozers? That's what I do every day. I love manufacturing. Why do you love it? Because you can touch it, because people use it, because it really is the foundation of the economy. So I used to work at a place called Aurora. That's a Caterpillar facility. We built backhoes, wheel loaders, ag tractors, feller bunchers, log loaders. It's like a kid in a candy shop when you walk out on the paint line. That's where they all come together and they're all there together. But you can feel it, you can touch it. And then as I've had a career with CAT, I've been able to see those things being used all over the world. In Japan after the Kobe earthquake. In New Orleans after the flood. Every place in the world, literally Europe, Canada, Mexico, these things are used. These things are part of the economy, part of the vital part of the economy. Now what we do at Jefferson is we build these little things. Pretty good chunks of iron. What you can't see is the technology. What you can't see is the quality that goes into those parts by the skilled labor that we have in our facility. These are engine components. This is a valve actuator. This is a fuel injector. These are pretty high tech. It may not look that way. Extremely high tech. We use these things. We link them together with computers. We link them together with the rest of the engine so that we can optimize fuel economy. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for our country to have cleaner air, and these parts play a role in that. We assemble these at Jefferson, right down the road. We've got a couple hundred people, fairly small facility, but those couple hundred really start to grow when you think about it. We use maybe 1,000 vendors in the area, local vendors, for anything from making spare parts to buying paper to buying printer, ink, and that kind of stuff. So 200 gets to several thousand very quickly. That's a big deal for the local economy. It's a big deal for taxes, a big deal for salaries. It's a big deal. We then take these things and we ship them to places like Griffin, Georgia, where they go into engines. We ship them to Greenville, South Carolina, where they go into engines. We ship them to Mossville, Illinois, where they go into engines. Thousands of people work at those facilities. They've got thousands of parts that look just like that coming to them that they're putting together. That is big for the economy. And now you start to get a feel for not only the local economy, but the impact on the whole national economy. Then start thinking about where these engines are used. They go into on-highway trucks. Anybody drive here today? That was my first time on the loop. It's a nightmare. Any trucks? You run into any highway trucks today? Carrying stuff? Probably got one of those in it. Either have 3 of these or 6 of these. Anybody's power ever go out? I know it does. I've lived here long enough to know it does. The utility trucks, Cat engines. Anywhere to the new roads in China, connected by those 200 people, that facility, right down the road. The tip of that part comes from Thomasville, Georgia. Mexico, the solenoid. Some of the parts on the outside from Pontiac, Illinois. Some of the parts on the inside from Germany. This particular part, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, is this huge chunk of iron here, this body. Piston back here, you can't see it, comes from China. This brake valve is called, comes from northeast United States. Pretty soon, this little chunk of iron impacts millions of people around the world. The local economy tied to the national economy, tied to the global economy. Manufacturing is a great way to make a living, okay? It really is. At our company, we like to say we make progress possible because we're involved with building roads in China. We're involved with the earthquake in Kobe. We're involved with the flooding and helping fix things down in New Orleans because of that. And we contribute to that right down the road at Jefferson. The great thing about being global, which is what I tried to paint a picture of there for us, is you have lots of opportunity. Our company has lots of opportunity for growth because we play on that global field. China alone, it's mind-boggling the potential there for our company and other companies. But it's a double-edged sword. With that competition, with that global playing field, you better be competitive. You better be flexible to change, or you're not going to be around very long. And our plant at Jefferson knows that quite well. We are an existing company. We've been through the startup, and we're at that different phase where we're trying to sustain our business here. Let me give you a little history of how we have hooked up with this competitive side of things. We started in May of '95, so we've been around 10 plus years. We started with 35 technicians. We decided we were going to use this facility to make the internal components for this fuel injector. And that involves precision machining. Precision machining in terms of a size we call microns. Give you an idea, a micron is 1,000 times smaller in diameter than your human hair is. So that gives you an idea of what precision machining is like. So we're brand new, we're greenfield, we got green employees. What in the world are we going to do? First of all, how did we get to Jefferson? Over 1,500 sites that we looked at around the world. It was one of our first smaller facilities. How did we pick Georgia? The incentives were a big deal. The incentives were a big reason why we decided to come to Georgia at that point in time. But what we really didn't quite understand was the whole quick start thing. So we've got 35 people that we're trying to teach microns to. That we're trying to teach not only what a micron is, because in some cases not everyone knows that, how do you make it? Well, we turn to these folks down here from Quick Start. And they customize programs for us. It really is a great, great deal. They helped us with our culture. They helped us with how to machine, how to understand. So very big incentive for us. In fact, so big, over time we've added 5 other manufacturing facilities in the state of Georgia. We've got a couple in Griffin. We've got one in LaGrange, one in Toccoa, and of course our sister facility in Thomasville. So that become quite an incentive for Caterpillar. And since that point in time as well, we've added more and more logistics centers. We've got several logistics centers across the state. So, a success story, right? The story's not over yet. Now the competition is growing on a worldwide basis. You've all heard of the wages in China, India, Mexico. The wages are lower, right? You've probably also all have heard that the value add of that labor is getting better. On the flip side, we have had tremendous growth in our part of the country. With that growth, we have to pay higher wages to maintain competitiveness with other businesses in our area. So over time, we've become less competitive in terms of wages. So what that means, the cat story is the same story that these two gentlemen just told you. We needed to add more value with our labor. We needed to be able to add more value than anyone else in the world to stay competitive. And basically we've done that by going to automation. We totally transitioned our facility within the last 2 years from that machining process that I told you about to high-tech assembly and test. High-tech assembly and test, it's robots, it's computer-controlled workstations, it's high-tech testing processes. Places where we can add very high value and still continue to pay the wage level that we need to pay to stay in this area. That did not come without a lot of pain. Within the last couple of years, we asked 25% of our people to change shifts. Mr. Hawk, you were talking about shift changes and working night shifts and weekends. That's hard. But over a quarter of our facility had to make that change to be competitive. Another 25% of our folks had to move from machining jobs to assembly jobs. Big skill difference. Big deal. And then over half of our people during that point in time moved from a different job, from one job to another. So we had pure chaos. Anybody in manufacturing with that kind of change, you know it's not for the faint of heart. It's a difficult transition. But we were successful. And we're right at the end of that success period, right at the beginning of the success being paid off in terms of our competitiveness. So why were we successful? First of all, I want to plug my leadership team because they're outstanding. You can't get through that without outstanding people. We talked a little bit earlier about management training, but it's a big deal to have great leaders. Our leaders, I think, at our facility are great. They understand competition. They understand hard work to remain competitive. But the second thing is our technicians simply got it done. They simply got it done. They moved to the new jobs. They learned the skills necessary to be successful on those new jobs. And then they worked very hard for us to introduce new products on time. Why did they do that? My personal opinion is that we built a foundation with Quick Start. When we started this thing, those same people that carried us through this were those people that started up the plant. They know about learning. They have a certain culture of hard work and skill. And I think that was a big deal for us making this transition work. We also had some help again from Quick Start. They were there when we needed them to develop training programs for this new equipment, this new machinery. About halfway through this thing, I heard about this Center of Innovation of Manufacturing Excellence. It was music to my ears. I wish I'd have had it when we started this transition. Right now we're using it in maintenance. Maintenance, you gentlemen hit on that too. Maintenance is a big deal for us, keeping that automated equipment running. And we need help. And the center's helping us with maintenance. They're part of our training programs now, part of our training matrices. And we expect to expand even more in terms of apprentice-type programs at some point. And we continue to think about doing that with our operators as well. Why is the center a big deal for us? 3 key reasons. First of all, we're going to go buy training. We're going to do it. The great thing about the center is it's cost competitive. We all talk about competition. Here's a case where a government program is working on that same thought process, being competitive, and they've got it. The second thing, they're very close to us and they're very timely. When we need something, they're right there. We can go to them very quickly. They can respond to our timing needs. And our timing needs are difficult. We're 24/7 as well. We may want to train somebody Saturday night at 11 at night. These guys will respond to that. And that's really the third point to this as well. They will tailor their programs to meet our needs. And we can't ask for anything more than that. So in terms of value add, in terms of business, in terms of competition, these guys add value to training, and we're happy to have that situation in front of us now and that option in front of us now. The center's helping us today, but I don't think I've really seen the real impact yet. Our business is going to change again. That's the only thing I know for sure. The one thing I discovered through this change that we just went through and the success is our core competency is not machining parts. It's not assembling parts. Our core competency is being able to react to the economy as it changes, be able to react to business as it changes. And we think we've got a leg up now with this incentive in place. It is truly an incentive for us. And with that, questions?
Dave, thank you. Representative Smith. I appreciate you being here. I heard that there was 5 or 6 towns in Georgia that work with you as part of your business, and I heard smaller communities, smaller towns involved. Yeah. Why not the big cities? Why did they pick the smaller towns?
Well, the towns we are, we're in some for different reasons. A lot of the logistics things that these gentlemen talk about is why we picked locations. Griffin, another good logistical location. Thomasville. Thomasville is fairly close to logistics. It was fairly close to some of the suppliers that we wanted to be close to, so that was one reason for that. Toccoa, I believe, was already an existing facility that we purchased. So for the most part, our model that we choose to locate is the same one the gentleman showed earlier from the university. And then smaller towns, I guess we're from a small town, but it worked out good with respect to being close to the university, with respect to being close to logistics, with respect to having a base of employees to draw from that were skilled.
Thank you. Any others? Thanks. And Jackie, appreciate you putting this together. It's very valuable information that we heard from all these presenters that are directly involved in manufacturing at the plant level. We appreciate y'all being here. Changing gears just a little bit, we've got about, if I'm reading this right, about 3 more presenters up here that will give short presentations or testimony to this committee. And moving right along into that, first, Steve Hollis. Steve, if you make your way down, please. Steve is the CEO with Power Partners. If you wouldn't mind taking the podium. And then following Steve will be Frank Millward. If you want to be moving a little closer up here, if you're not already. These lights are getting me, so I can't tell where you are. All right. Steve, please go ahead.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity, and I will stay on the short part. You'll be glad to know. That'll be helpful. I'll try to give a little unique twist to some of what I've heard, but a brief bit of context. That twist is going to be about retaining and growing existing industry more than bringing new industry in. I have been a part of the new industry piece as well. I spent 12 years with Georgia-Pacific. During that time, we gained approval to build a new plant in Monticello, Georgia. Used Quick Start to do that, and very pleased with all the services. So let me on the front end echo all the accolades for the state in that regard. But my business partner and I have a consulting firm for 10 years now. We've been all around the U.S. as well as internationally consulting with primarily manufacturing. 80+% of our clients are manufacturing folks, all dealing with one primary thing: change. How do we handle change in this global environment you just heard described by Dave, with parts coming from all over the world, competition coming from all over the world, definitely a changing environment. So that led us in 2003. My business partner is Dr. Sherry Ford, and we bought what was originally a Westinghouse plant about 10 miles from here, built in 1958. So I can definitely relate to the need for automation and other things. I'll speak more to that momentarily. But Asia Brown Boveri, ABB, had bought that facility in 1990 and had not made a profit in the 13 years it owned it. The plant, actually going back to Westinghouse days, has not made a profit in the last 17 years. Hopefully this year, with a little providential assistance, we'll have the first year in 17 that will be profitable. We make pole-mounted distribution transformers today. So when the hurricane hits and the power's down, our folks go into what's called continuous operations. Last year during Katrina, they worked 27 days straight. Many of those days, 10 and 12-hour days. A lot of Herculean, heroic efforts by the folks in our facility. We're rare in that today, and I always emphasize today, we do not have international competition. There is virtually no competition coming into the U.S. for distribution transformers. And there are some reasons for that that probably aren't germane necessarily to today, but just quickly to say, the utility industry, thanks to the likes of Georgia Power and Southern Company, want to buy products made in the U.S. It is a specified engineered product that we make, so it's not catalog. You can't buy it off the shelf from anywhere in the world. And labor is not the predominant cost. If you look at our pie chart, 65% of our cost is raw materials, direct materials going into the product. So activities around the supply chain, as much as I echo the love for manufacturing, there's nothing better at the end of the day than putting your hand on something that you know you had a part with building. But activities like supply chain matter much more to our business than just low-cost labor. So we're not focused on trying to cut wages, cut heads, anything of that sort. A couple of other brief points of context. Our plant under Westinghouse employed 1,600 employees. We have 672,000 square feet under roof, 14 acres. The property we sit on is 160 acres. Probably at most 10 of that is developed with our building and parking lots. This community locally here has lost over 4,000 manufacturing jobs within 30 miles of here in the last 7 years. So while we've grown, thanks to areas like Jefferson and others, we've lost more probably, if you looked at the math, than we've grown. So I want to make sure my comments center around how do we retain the industry we have. Just a couple of other pieces. When we bought the business, it had 425 employees roughly. We sit at just over 500 today. So we've added 75 plus jobs in the 3.5 years since we bought the business, most of those being direct labor, some of them in the salaried ranks as well. There are really three main things I think we as existing industry need. One you've heard loud and clear. I wasn't here in the very beginning, but every single speaker I've heard so far has said it, and I almost am tempted to test the audience to see if you remember. But that's workforce development, whether that be around skills for manufacturing today, whether that be around crafts and trades. We have been trying to hire 6 electromechanics for 6 months. And we currently have only had a net addition of 3 because every one we hire, we lose one, retirement, drawn to other locales in the country, et cetera. Very, very difficult. We have an apprenticeship program. We're working with Athens Tech, thanks to Jerry Barrow and Dr. Tidings I see in the audience, doing a great job helping us assess our maintenance folks and work on training and the skills, but that's a long-term answer. And the problem is we need those people today. So unfortunately, the fact that we started, since we bought the business didn't solve the problem that we have currently. 40% of our workforce has been there 25 plus years. So we're facing a huge knowledge, skills, and experience drain in the next 5 years because they all hit retirement eligibility at 30 years. So for us, workforce development is a huge issue for going forward as well as our immediate need. But also you heard several folks mention work ethic, and it continues to be a huge issue for us. I want to give credit maybe in a way you wouldn't expect. We have 2 unions in our facility, and we call them our partners because they are. It is not a traditional management labor relationship that most of us in manufacturing may have been through in our careers. It is a partnership, and the efforts and the progress we've made around work ethic has been thanks in large part to that partnership with our unions. But we really need to try to find a way to educate, train, and reinforce folks that enter the workforce to know what it's about to work. Not just in manufacturing, obviously, but elsewhere. We're roughly 6 days, 24 hours a day. During hurricanes, as I mentioned earlier, that gets a lot different. So we need folks who understand shift rotations and the other things that are required for that as well. I think there's some alternative things around workforce development the state could look at in terms of, as an example, the demographics changing today to single parents in manufacturing mean we need daycare centers. We have a lot of land, but we don't have money. So if the state would work in some way with us to try to put something there, we're near several other industries where we're located. So I think there are opportunities for the state to look at workforce development maybe in a different way than just quick start training, which is obviously a critical foundation for us. Secondly, incentives around capital investment. I mentioned our plant's 1958 constructed. About 70% of the equipment is original, 50 years old. So every day we have a new opportunity, we like to call it. And our maintenance folks have been doing a great job. The fact that the plant lost money exacerbates that issue because if you understand manufacturing and financials, especially in corporate America, it means it didn't spend any money for the last 13 years on the equipment either. And so unfortunately, we're kind of dealing with a dual-headed monster in terms of trying to revamp some of that. We need incentives, and those incentives today in Georgia primarily are around tax credits. That doesn't help a plant that's not profitable, because you don't pay taxes if you're not profitable of a significant enough nature for that incentive to matter. I have mentioned this a couple of other public forums where the governor was. I don't know if he's letting me back in his audiences anymore or not, but I do think Georgia has to deal with that issue. How do we give incentives uniquely in a turnaround manufacturing business differently than how we do it when we're attracting a business in, where tax credits matter greatly, obviously. So capital investment, and I would suggest the state make sure that investment yields jobs. If you happen to catch last night on one of the news stations, there was a little debate about the fact that there are 15 million middle-class manufacturing jobs at risk in the next 9 years for outsourcing. And former Secretary of Labor Robert Rice was speaking and commented on the fact that he went to a grand opening of a plant in a Midwestern state where he knew the governor and was really excited to be there, and he walked in to see all the automation and innovation and found that they only had 15 jobs. So the downside of the automation innovation is it often means less jobs. That's not always the case. In our case, it's not. We need direct labor that we can add, and the automation will make it easier for them to do the job and a higher value-add content, as you heard Dave discuss as well. So that capital should, in our opinion at least, be focused on trying to increase jobs and not just decrease them. There is a regional theme I want to kind of wrap up on that turnarounds are a unique part of, but so is new industry. If the region as a whole can become healthy in manufacturing, meaning better profitability, better sustainability, better viability, then the region creates a workforce that's skilled. And the negative downside usually is less employees. But the upside potential is if enough folks are creating those better environments and yielding employees freed up that are skilled and trained, we now have what, from my economic development experience, is the #1 attractor for new industry. We have a skilled workforce. But that has to be a collaborative effort so that workforce knows it's not a negative to learn something and necessarily be in a different location after you learn it. To me, the greatest story is if a plant goes away, that every employee there gets an equal or better job somewhere else immediately. And those are rare, but they do happen, and it takes a lot of collaborative effort. My last parting point for you, just as a couple of two parts to it. One is our future efforts. We're not just wanting to make pole-mounted distribution transformers today. We're working on chicken fat-based oil. If you're familiar, we're over here at the university area. The university's actually been working on this, has run the boilers, I'm told, to some degree off of it already. We put an average of 20 gallons of mineral oil in every transformer. We make 169,000 transformers this year. It's a lot of oil. And we need that oil to be made out of something better than petroleum. Not only for the environmental and alternative reasons, but for the cost and volatility reasons. And so we're working with the university in Pilgrim's Pride up in the Virginia area, not the local facility, to try to come up with that. But it's us in the middle of a turnaround trying to also work on that. We need some help. We're working on solar water heaters. It's the U.S. in the global marketplace around solar water heating. If you take swimming pools out of the picture, we're in the other category. The U.S. is not even a country listed on the global list of solar water heating. We can do something about that, and we have some models related to revenue bond and how states could incentivize homeowners and manufacturing and utilities to use alternative sources. So we've been working on that for about 2 years in several states in the country as well. Lastly, just a parting comment, our largest competitor is in Laurel, Mississippi. Last year he received a $35 million grant in return for a promise of 1,600 jobs. I've made this offer now about a half a dozen times. I will promise the state of Georgia 1,600 jobs if you give me a $35 million grant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that promise. This committee will do all we can. Thank you for being here. Frank, if you would, please come up to the podium. Go right ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for this opportunity. Our company has been in Georgia for a while, and Georgia's been good to us. We hope we've been good for Georgia. So we really value this opportunity to share what we are and some of our views on this with you. For those of you who don't know Marial, and I'll keep this brief, and probably be changing a little bit because we're not only a manufacturing company, we're also an R&D company, and I'll explain how that's evolved. So that creates some specific challenges. Marial, better known in this community historically as Rhône-Mérieux, pronounced in the Georgia way, and you'll hear some of the French connotation there, has been in this community for a long time. Marial is an animal health company. We're actually world leaders. In fairness, we trade first and second place with our friend at Pfizer every year. This year, we should be coming out first in the world. We're present in over 150 countries. Marial's about 5,000 employees worldwide. Our sales in 2005 exceeded $2 billion for the first time. Some of you may know some of our products. If you have a dog or a cat, you may know Frontline or HeartGuard. Rabies vaccines are one of the bigger products that are made out of the facility here in Athens. Marial in Georgia is a very strong presence. Actually, it's our second largest presence in the world. Marial in Georgia has 3 locations. Duluth is our worldwide headquarters. Athens, established in 1981 as a vaccine manufacturing facility, and actually the oldest facility we have here is a Select facility in Gainesville, which pre-existed in 1981, which was truly a homegrown business serving the poultry industry that is now one of the world leaders in the poultry industry. To give you an idea, that's over 1,000 employees. Duluth is about 450. Gainesville is 220, and our Athens facility today is over 400 employees. Consider that we started with 12 employees back in 1981 in a facility that looked like a double-wide trailer, and we now have a state-of-the-art modern vaccine manufacturing plant here. So our company has developed very significantly over all these years. We've invested in our physical plant well in excess of $10 million a year for the past 5 years, and we're looking at future significant expansions both in our R&D laboratories as well as in our manufacturing facilities. Maybe a not too well-known fact, our facility here in Athens produces more than half the doses of animal rabies vaccine sold in the United States out of here in Athens, and it's the largest rabies manufacturing facility in the world. It's also where we make the only product in the world that controls rabies in wildlife, and you may have heard of those programs where we drop these baits out there and raccoons pick them up and are protected against rabies, and that vaccine was at least partially actually developed here with collaboration with the University of Georgia. Our Athens facility is not only a manufacturing facility. It is a big manufacturing facility for us in the area of vaccine development. But it's not only that, it's also a research and development facility. And actually, and maybe I have that bias, but actually that started off as really no R&D to a kind of local support, for U.S. developments to what is now really on the map as a standalone research facility that is collaborating with our larger research facilities in the United States or around the world. We have a group of about 40 people, top-level scientists, and are working on programs that are truly cutting-edge technology. And that's very satisfying for us in terms of our evolution. Our manufacturing facility is growing. It's growing with needs for more and more skills. Manufacturing environment of pharmaceuticals is a changing environment, both in Europe and the United States, and that opens up the door to needs in many different areas. People that become skilled in good manufacturing practices, good laboratory practices, modern manufacturing management technologies like Lean or Six Sigma. Quite a change from 20 or 25 years ago when things were done pretty small scale in that double-wide trailer. That is a very big challenge on recruiting and training people. Over the years, we've benefited from the business incentives that the state of Georgia has provided. And I can remember personally at several different occurrences, there was competition out there for the expansion of this site. Other states in this country were competing pretty hard to get us to move. I remember New York, where we had facilities for a while and an important technology there, state of Texas. I remember it was another case. And we successfully kept the business here in Athens, including in Athens and in Georgia, including very recently. So we have benefited from a lot of the good collaborations we've had with this state. I can cite a few of those. It actually, in fairness, started off, really everything started with a collaboration with the University of Georgia. And we had the pleasure and privilege to present to a joint committee of your houses on that particular issue, on the need to further enhance the opportunities that we have at the University of Georgia. Certainly the NBAF submission that the University of Georgia is spearheading for the state of Georgia for the new Federal Animal Disease Research Center is something we view as extremely important, and every inch of support or ounce of support that can be brought behind that in what will probably turn out to be a very political decision is very important. The relations with state and local authorities throughout this, in establishing the company, the financial incentives we had, and of course, as been stated by others before me, perhaps today the direct financial incentives are less critical than in some other areas, but certainly when we started they were important. So we need to take our hats off to that. And as has been stated by many other people at this podium, the extraordinary efforts in the way of training have been extremely useful. Quick Start needs to be commended. We've worked with Quick Start. I think Larry Reeves, our HR person, was telling me that just last year was $85,000 somewhere in value of training provided to the 50 new employees that we brought on board. So those are extremely valuable. For the future, I'd like to share with you just a couple of areas. One is kind of pro domo, in other words, the sort of incentives we're looking for as a company, or incentive or help or collaboration, but also talk about things that we see for the broader community that are critical for our success as well. We're always competing within our own organization for expansions. I mean, an R&D facility can be put in different places. So we're always in a situation of competition, and we want to make sure that we continue to be successful in that competition. So certainly, as I've already said, University of Georgia, but more broadly, all the university system, and Athens Tech, for instance, in the training of technicians is critical. And actually, that is probably one of the biggest sticking points right now, and I know we're working on that with Athens Tech, but we probably need to expand that, and if what I read in the newspapers is correct on what happened on some recent deals, that is a handicap today. We have not much concern about bringing scientists to Georgia. We home growth a lot of those, and those will go on national searches, and we all, especially this season, we all know how nice it is to be living in Georgia. So that's not too much of our challenge. Our skilled technical labor force is a challenge to this day. It's difficult to recruit, as the person ahead of me on this stand said. We have some certain key positions that we have a hard time to fill. And that includes not only skilled, let me call them biotechnicians, but also people in all the supportive areas, bioengineering, maintenance, quality, quality assurance, good laboratory practice, good manufacturing practice. Certainly, we're still today at a disadvantage if we go to Research Triangle Park or Boston or California, and where there's a big enough pool there to work with. It is certainly something we're already working on. We need to continue in that direction. The other aspect that I think is also critical and sometimes not completely seen, and this is moving outside of our own company. We're probably just borderline critical mass right now in biotechnology in this community, and we know that is a major will that we get on the map in Georgia in the area of biotechnology. And we probably still need to do some work in that area. Any support that's given, and a lot of that has already been done, but continued support to the creation of small businesses. We found as a larger entity dealing with universities, and I've seen that personally, up to about 10, 15 years ago, a lot of our research contracts, and there's essentially not one research program that doesn't involve some degree of collaboration. Most of those were done with universities. Over the past 15 years, that's changed significantly, and we're now networking with many small companies, and several in this town. I think both parties have seen an incentive and advantages to kind of move to this middle ground. So anything that can be done to further enhance that in this community or along certainly the Athens to Atlanta corridor will be very important also to us because we work with these people and they participate in critical mass. The other areas where we see things lacking, and I think my predecessors touched on that as well, and that would go with critical mass, is in the support areas. It is frustrating today when we want to build state-of-the-art containment facilities for handling microbes that we cannot find locally the engineering firms or the building firms that have that kind of experience or at least willing to go in that direction. And when we put out bids, we see a lot of people coming from the Carolinas or coming from further abroad, and that is something we need to continue to incentivize here so that happens. We are very dependent, and you will imagine that when we're competing in our company for building a new facility, the ability and the probability of success that that facility will be delivered on time and with those rigorous specifications is critical. We have to be able to convince our worldwide decision makers that we can do that here in Georgia without too much difficulty. And that is, while things are progressing, that is an area we need to continue to progress. And I'll just finish in terms of incentives, just to reemphasize the training. We plan to continue to expand and further training in what is, as you all know, a rapidly evolving field is today critical and is going to remain critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate you being here. We have according to my agenda, one last presenter. That is Roy Bowen with the Georgia Textile Manufacturers Association. Roy, welcome to the podium.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Roy Bowen, president of GTMA, the Georgia Traditional Manufacturers Association. And I'm joined here this morning by Clay Jones, who's our vice president and general counsel. Chairman Lewis, we thank you and the members of the study committee for your interest in enhancing the manufacturing environment in Georgia by examining the role and the value of business incentives. As has been stated earlier, Georgia's manufacturers compete not only across state lines, but globally, and the competition is quite fierce. Sound public policy can and should play a role in helping Georgia's manufacturers compete in a fiercely competitive global economy. Not only should job creation be a concern of state government, but even more significant is the retention of manufacturing jobs. Good examples of sound public policy in this regard have been shared with the committee this morning and at earlier committee meetings. The focus of my brief remarks this afternoon, however, is the sales and use tax generally and the exemption for machinery and repair parts used in the manufacturing process more specifically. Most states, including Georgia, exempt machinery and materials used in the manufacturing process from sales and use taxes. This public policy, the public policy for doing so are really to avoid tax pyramiding and to encourage industrial investment and job creation and retention. Georgia's exemptions in this regard are found at OCGA 48-8-3. The exemption applies to machinery which is used directly in the manufacture of tangible personal property. However, Georgia courts and the Department of Revenue apply the most restrictive interpretation of the exemption, adopting the direct use theory, also known as the Ohio rule or the physical change rule. This theory holds that each individual component of a system must act directly on the manufacture of a product. In other words, it must touch or act upon the product. And the exemption does not otherwise apply even if the equipment is essential and integral to the manufacturing process. Georgia's business development efforts tout the manufacturing equipment sales tax exemption to businesses either considering locating in Georgia or expanding current in-state operations. But in reality, the exemption is not as valuable as promoted and is a source of litigation and cause for significant administrative expense, both for the state and really for the manufacturers. Current sales tax audits of industry in Georgia are cumbersome and an administrative burden. Auditors are picking apart integrated processes, frequently denying the exemption to certain components. Let me cite just a real-world example of the problem with the way the current law has been interpreted. A coder in a textile plant would qualify for the exemption, but the necessary catwalk that spans the coder, which is mandated by federal OSHA standards, will not. GTMA recommends that Georgia adopt the integrated plant theory in determining the sales and use tax liability. The distinction between integrated plant theory and the current Department of Revenue practice is that components of the manufacturing system do not have to come into direct contact with the product, but must be a necessary and integral part of the manufacturing process. This philosophy is more consistent with avoiding multiple taxation and encouraging manufacturing investment and job creation and retention. Integrated plant theory also makes more sense from a public policy perspective. The relationship of equipment to the manufacturing process and whether it merits the sales tax exemption should be based on its economic relationship to the product. That is it a necessary component of a continuous integrated process rather than the test of physical relationship or touching the product. Another significant advantage of integrated plant theory is that it is administratively simpler than the current approach, providing more certainty to industry and requiring less work from an already overburdened staff of state auditors. This is a competitiveness issue when viewed in terms of what other states are doing. South Carolina recently reiterated that it is an integrated plant theory state in an administrative case affirmed by the South Carolina Court of Appeals. There is no ready reference to determine which states employ integrated plant theory because that term is not always used in the statutes and it's been interpreted differently in each of the states. Some states even have the word directly in their statute, like Georgia, but still employ the integrated plant theory. Missouri and Arizona would be two such states. Most states in the Southeast employ integrated plant theory or something very close, even if not labeled as such. Outside the Southeast, as noted by the South Carolina Court and by scholars, the overwhelming majority of states that have addressed similar tax exemption statutes, even ones with the words directly, have rejected the narrow Ohio rule. Arizona, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Massachusetts, New York, Oklahoma, and Wyoming are a few examples. The Georgia courts and the Georgia Department of Revenue have interpreted the used directly language in the most restrictive manner possible, unlike states who have found similar language consistent with the integrated plant theory. Therefore, we believe that statutory changes are necessary, and GTMA would respectfully request that the General Assembly favorably consider legislation that would clarify what we believe to have been its intent when it provided the sales and use tax exemption for machinery, that being the integrated plant theory. Mr. Chairman and committee members, I realize that I've covered this topic really at the 80,000-foot level. GTMA is in the process of developing a more detailed white paper on the integrated plant theory for your use, and of course we'd be more than pleased to assist you and your colleagues in every possible way as you consider our recommended legislative approach. And we thank you very much for this time and the opportunity.
Thank you, Roy. I think Representative Martin, do you have a quick question?
I did, if we have time. I know we're running late.
Right ahead.
Roy, if I could ask you, one of the things that you said in this process, and I think I understand what you're saying, is what we have is auditors in the Department of Revenue. And first of all, this is not a forum to to really take issue with the Department of Revenue.
Exactly.
I don't think you were doing that. I didn't hear you do that.
Right.
It was just that the way the statute is written is being interpreted. But basically what you're saying there is we have auditors in the Department of Revenue that we're asking them to put on a manufacturing process hat and decide which part, is a part that's directly, as the statute reads, affects manufacturing.
Correct.
Whereas their expertise should be in accounting, tax, audit type things. We've actually asked them to put a hat on that perhaps they're not degreed to do. And what you're requesting is that the state would have to make a policy decision. Do we want to adopt that approach? But if that was the policy decision that was adopted in the past, that we make that clear so we can get our Department of Revenue about the business they should be in and not try to make them manufacturing experts.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I think that is one of the things that would affect all Georgia manufacturers,
Yes,
to know what rules you're playing by and not come in and making big investments in Georgia and then find out that the rules might, they're subject to interpretation without blaming anybody.
That's exactly
we can clear
right.
that up, regardless of what carries the day from the policy debate down in the legislature and in the governor's office. I think clearing it up is a win either way.
Yes, sir, you're exactly right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that question, Representative Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Roy. That concludes our agenda for this meeting of the Business Incentive Study Committee. And all that went into this just didn't happen. There's a lot of people out there to express gratitude to. So I first want to start with our committee assistant, Abby Richardson, sitting right over here. A lot of you, none of this would be possible without her. I know a lot of you communicate directly with her, and she's been a gem to work with and making us look good, better than we actually are. So Abby, thank you for all that you do for this committee. A number of other expressions of gratitude. Randy Powers, University of Georgia, thank you, and thank President Michael Adams on behalf of this committee. This is a wonderful facility, and you've been very gracious in allowing us to use this. Also want to mention the Athens, Clarke County, and the Oconee County Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate all y'all's help in putting this together as well. Thank you so much. Nancy Hall with Georgia Public Television, they're here videoing this, as well as our own internet from the House Research. Is that the name they're using now? House Information Office. Excuse me on that. They're using that here as well as an internet feed. So we appreciate all that help in putting this together. Our final meeting tentatively is scheduled for October the 25th. That is a Wednesday. It is approximately 2 weeks from today. We're looking at a facility on the campus or near the campus of Georgia Tech in Atlanta to have that meeting. The topic there will be energy and new technologies as it relates to business incentives. There will be some more firm information coming to all of you who are interested from Abby. That's the way we've done this process so far. As we get through with one meeting, we start building on the next one. So tentatively, that's what we're looking at, the October the 25th, Energy and New Technology in Atlanta on Georgia Tech. But again, Abby will send that information out. And for any of you who are interested and you're not on Abby's contact list, please see her when you get through and swap information. We'll be more than happy to keep you informed. And the next meeting is our last planned official meeting for this study committee. After that, of course, there'll be a lot of work in putting together the pieces of what we need to do and what we need to address and perhaps what we don't need to address. These meetings have been very helpful to me, particularly today, hearing from some of the plant managers and from those involved with Quick Start and our Department of Technical and Adult Education, some of the frontline folks here who make manufacturing go. And I particularly wanted this meeting to focus on manufacturing because I think someone said it best earlier. Our economy is built around it. What would our economy be without manufacturing in this state and in this country for that matter? And I think addressing it here on the state level is just a small step in what we can do, hopefully nationwide, to keep manufacturing jobs here in America. So with that, let me thank all of you for being here this morning and this afternoon. Thank you for your patience. This has been a worthwhile meeting to me and this committee, and with that, we'll adjourn.